Chapter 980. Somewhere in the front lines of the Kundi race, the remnants of the Kundi race's main fleet were slowly cruising through the universe. Not long ago, this fleet, which was codenamed Sea Flag, had experienced a fierce battle and been ambushed by a dynasty general. The command ship and the guards had fought with their lives and escaped with their lives. There were only 20-odd battleships left beside the command ship, and the other battleships had either been destroyed or scattered. The Sea Flag fleet belonged to the 3rd Space Corps of the Kundi race, and the commander of this fleet was the famous general of the 3rd Corps, Oliert. He was known as the future star of the 3rd Corps. A few years ago, the Marshal of the 3rd Corps had reached the age of retirement, and Oliert was seen as the first candidate for the position. However, because they had received information about the fallen spaceship, the upper echelons had made the decision to delay the retirement of all the officers, and this matter had been delayed. At this moment, the Sea Flag fleet, which had just suffered a defeat, was moving stealthily while waiting for the next order from the command center. In the bridge of the command ship, the atmosphere was silent and dejected. Everyone was immersed in the sorrow of losing a battle and losing their comrades. Oliert stood silently in front of the porthole, leaving his back view for all the operators and adjutant in the room. The color of the shell on his body was a mixture of sorrowful green and angry red. In the previous battle, he had been led by the nose by the enemy commander, and he was a part of the reason why they had lost the battle. Everyone knew that the commander was the one under the most pressure and did not dare disturb him. The adjutant hesitated for a long time before walking to Oliert's side and saying softly, "Sir, there's no need to say any more." Oliert turned around, and his body gradually turned back to a calm blue color. "This is not my personal failure but the failure of the Civilization Foundation. I did not lose to the enemy but to the entire civilization." Oliert knew that his ability as a commander could not be compared to the dynasty's general, but he felt that it was not just a matter of personal ability but also the foundation of the civilization. During the fight, he had made the most delicate operation and decision he had ever made. He believed that his performance this time could even be used as an important lesson in the military academy. However, what shocked him was that the enemy's reaction was unbelievably fast. The enemy saw through his arrangement almost instantly. It was like two sides playing chess, and the enemy saw through the backup plan he had racked his brains to set up 10 steps away. It was as if the enemy had memorized the chess book. Encountering such an opponent was a heavy blow to the commander's confidence. This did not mean that Oliert's standards were lacking. In fact, he could already be considered a famed general by the standards of the Kundi race. The reason for this was that the abilities of the dynasty's famed generals were far superior to his, but the deeper reason was the difference in the foundation of their civilization. The rise of the 3 universal civilizations was accompanied by the cries of countless races. They walked step by step through the flames of war, and all the war cases were written in the curriculum of the military academy. Therefore, no matter what situation the officers encountered, they could instantly come up with a corresponding solution. Their thinking was more flexible. On the other hand, the Kundi race had far too little experience in galactic wars, and the number of battles they had was far from comparable to the dynasty. All of the strategies used by their officers were old strategies that had been eliminated many years ago. After fighting in actual combat, Oliert was pessimistic. He could not see the possibility of winning the war at all, and the defeat of the various fleets was the best proof. In fact, he was not the only one. Different from the radical views of the Kundi race's upper echelons, the soldiers fighting on the front lines all had pessimistic views of this war. They were angry that their homeland was being targeted by the enemy, but they did not feel that sacrificing themselves in this war was necessary. However, military orders were absolute, and the orders of the upper echelons were the will of the soldiers. Oliert sighed inwardly and put away his pessimistic thoughts. He looked at his adjutant and asked in a deep voice, "What's the matter? Has the command been sent over?" ere it was just sent over. He wants us to wait here and recover the scattered fleet. We will then gather with the main fleet of the Third Army and plan a round of attacks on the enemy's Stargate. Upon hearing this, Oliert slammed the table and said in anger, Bullsh *T. Why aren't we retreating? Has the command center really gone mad? We've just been scattered, and we still want to stay in this dangerous area to find our old troops? Do you think the enemy won't chase after us? Furthermore, our main fleet has already been defeated to such an extent, and we still want to forcefully gather and attack the enemy's Stargate? This is akin to sending us to our deaths. Many of the officers in the room felt that there was something wrong with this tactical arrangement, but they did not dare voice their anger. They all stared at Oliert and waited for the commander's decision. Oliert paced back and forth before suppressing his anger and saying, Contact the marshal. I want to ask him personally what's going on with this decision. The adjutant nodded and immediately acted. A communication interface popped up on the virtual screen. After waiting for a few seconds, the other party picked up, and the figure of the Third Army Marshal appeared on the screen. Oliert, I heard that you were attacked. Thankfully, you're still alive. It's partly because of luck. Oliert calmed himself down and said, I received orders from the command center. We're planning to attack the enemy's Stargate? Yes, this is the command center's order. Don't you think there's a problem? The battle has already deviated from the original plan. We shouldn't continue fighting. That will only cause more troops to be sacrificed. I know. I also think that it's time to retreat. I'm currently negotiating with the upper echelons. Before that, listen to the orders first. Upon hearing this, Oliert fell silent and hung up. The adjutant carefully asked, Sir, what should we do now? Oliert glanced at him and suddenly said, How many battleships do we have left? 24. Gather all the captains and pull them into the communication channel. Hearing this, everyone immediately took action. Oliert stood in place with his hands behind his back and waited for a while. Instantly, one image after another appeared on the screen. They were all the remaining captains. This time, Oliert made a hand gesture and slowly said, Remember this. I'll only say what I'm going to say next once. He gave a bunch of meaningless encouragement and repeated the command center's order. During this process, he kept making all sorts of hand gestures. All the captains stared at him intently. All right, that's all I have to say. Everyone, get moving. Finally, Oliert put down his hand and ended his speech. The images of the captains on the screen dimmed one after another. At this time, the adjutant looked at another command screen and exclaimed, Sir, all the captains have turned off their artificial intelligence cores and blocked all external information. We can't contact them. However, Oliert had already expected this. He calmly nodded and said, Very good. Turn off the artificial intelligence cores of our spaceships as well. Everyone was shocked. They suddenly understood something and could not believe it. Did this mean they were going to become deserters? The adjutant was stunned. Oliert glared at him, and his tone suddenly became stern. Why aren't you going? The adjutant hesitated for a moment but still ran off to make the arrangements. Very soon, he got someone to turn off the artificial intelligence cores of the command ship. This way, the remnants of this sea flag fleet became a ghost fleet that had lost contact with the outside world. Oliert slowly exhaled, looked at the confused people around him, and explained, Sorry, this is all for the sake of caution. If I'm not wrong, our quantum network has been completely infiltrated by the enemy. As soon as this was said, everyone was shocked. Glancing around, Oliert slowly said, I know the Marshal very well. He's a rigid soldier who would never question the orders of the higher-ups. Although we're in a critical period now and everyone can change, we can't let go of any suspicious points. I suspect that the person just now wasn't the Marshal at all. The enemy has very likely infiltrated our command system. I don't need to explain the consequences. Thus, the war is already over, and I can no longer follow their orders. We can only save ourselves now. The hand signals I gave just now were a special signal that only a few people know about. I got all the captains to cut off the connection. From now on, we can only rely on ourselves." Everyone was dumbfounded by these words. They were unable to accept such a huge amount of information, and their minds went blank. The adjutant clenched his teeth and mustered up his courage. "Sir, this is desertion." However, Oliert was not angry and glanced at him coldly. "This is a battle that we will definitely lose. No matter what you think, I will not send my remaining subordinates to the battlefield to sacrifice themselves." Desertion? No, maybe we are the last survivors of the Kundi race. Then, where should we go now? As far away from here as possible. Oliert looked out of the porthole and into the depths of space. "I feel that there might be a problem with the route." In a cramped spaceship room, a few Kundi race members in ordinary clothes were gathered in a circle. This was one of the spaceships in the migration fleet, and it was filled with civilians. Most of them were uneasy and confused about the future, and the atmosphere was gloomy. Due to the large population, every spaceship had a group of civilians squeezed into a room. The people in this room were all brothers who were born in the same nest and were related to each other by blood. "Big brother, what did you discover?" a short brother asked. The big brother of this group of brothers was a burly mantis shrimp. He said in a low voice, "I have a friend who is a crew member on the guide ship. He told me some insider information. According to the plan, the fleet should have arrived at a planet yesterday for a short rest. However, they did not encounter any planets yesterday, and the fleet has been moving." "Could they have changed the plan? Why don't you ask your friend again?" "I haven't been able to contact my friend," the big brother said with a deep voice. "I feel that there might be something wrong." "Big brother, could it be that you're too sensitive? If there's a problem, the higher-ups will definitely inform us." "I have a bad feeling, but I can't put my finger on it." The big brother shook his head. "Sigh, what's the point of thinking so much? We can't help anyway. Let's just listen to the fleet's arrangements," one of the brothers said casually. Right at this moment, the youngest brother beside him suddenly said, "Big brother is right. There's a problem with the route of the fleet. We're going back the way we came." Hearing that, everyone looked at him. "Don't spout nonsense. How did you find out?" The little brother pointed at the porthole. Everyone looked over and saw that there was a simple graffiti on the porthole. It was a series of circles drawn from the smallest to the largest. At this moment, there was a planet outside the window that perfectly fit into one of the circles in the middle. Seeing that, everyone's expression changed. Living in the same house, no one had any secret. Some time ago, a planet appeared in the fleet's vision, and the little brother used a paintbrush to draw the outline of the planet on the porthole every day. The circles changed from small to large, then from large to small. It changed every day, representing the distance. At this moment, this planet's outline actually overlapped with the one a few days ago. Everyone understood what this meant. "I'll go ask." Seeing that, the big brother could not sit still anymore, and everyone hurriedly followed behind. The group hurriedly passed through the back half of the cabin, which was as crowded as a refugee camp, and came to the middle part of the cabin. They found a few soldiers on the ship and reported the situation. "You said there's a problem with the route?" A soldier picked his ear and said impatiently, "This is not something you should be worried about." "What are you worrying about?" "It's true. I can show you the evidence." All right. The soldier waved his hand. "The guiding ship has a star map. If it really deviates from the route, it will definitely adjust immediately. You guys just go back and wait." The big brother had no choice but to take his brothers back and wait. However, after 3 consecutive days, they stared at the graffiti on the porthole every day and found that the fleet was still going back the way they came. There was no adjustment at all. The big brother contacted the friend who leaked the information every day, and only on the 3rd day did he contact the other party. However, the other party's answer made his heart sink. You said we deviated from the route? No, our star map shows that the route is completely correct. We didn't encounter the supply planet I mentioned? Oh, this is a long-distance observation error. The star map is not very accurate. We have already reported it to the higher-ups, and they have updated our star map. There is no problem now. What graffiti record? You guys might have made a mistake. That is a new planet marked on the updated star map, not the one we saw before. Anyway, the navigation device here shows that the route has been moving forward. The big brother turned off the communicator with a cold face and was silent for a long time. Suddenly, he seemed to have made up his mind. He said, "Do you guys believe me or the higher-ups?" The brothers looked at each other and hesitated. "What do you want to do?" The little brother could not help but ask. "My intuition is getting stronger and stronger. There must be a problem. Maybe the higher-ups are sending us into the fire pit." The big brother lowered his voice. "I don't want to stay on the spaceship anymore. I am going to steal supplies and escape pods. We will escape on our own." "Are you crazy?" Someone was stunned. "This is suicide. The fleet will definitely catch us. Even if we succeed, the stolen supplies will be used up sooner or later. There will be no food, no fuel. What will we do when the time comes? Also, do you have a star map? Without a star map, how are we going to escape? I can get the star map and access to the escape pods from my friend. As for supplies, the medium escape pods have complete facilities. As long as we reach the planet, we can use the collector to replenish the fuel inventory. It will be enough for us to use for many years. To solve the food problem, we will need greenhouse incubators, crop seeds, and nutrient paste makers. These things can be obtained on the spaceship. During the incubation period, we can hibernate in the cryogenic chamber." The big brother said in a low voice, "I have been thinking about the escape route for the past 3 days. This is not a decision I made on the spot." Everyone still shook their heads. Leaving the main group of people to build a new home, a few of them running to the unknown universe to survive? Just thinking about it made them feel that this plan was too crazy. "I will go with you." At this time, the little brother stood up and shrugged. "Big brother, you know me. I don't like to be bound by rules. Since I have left my home, I do not intend to continue living a stable life of following the crowd. The universe is so big. I want to see it for myself. You can say that I like to take risks and seek excitement, but count me in." The big brother nodded and looked at the other brothers. "I know that everyone has their concerns. The universe is too big. If there are only a few of us, this will touch the deepest loneliness and fear in our hearts. Perhaps I will be proven wrong in the end, but I do not want to wait passively. I will not force everyone to go with me." The little brother hesitated for a while and said, "Big brother, I will go with you. You are the person I trust the most. I believe in your judgment." Hearing this, more people wavered. Someone shook his head helplessly. "Sigh, forget it. Let's go. From the moment we left our home, I will treat this life as dead. So what if we take a little more risk? We are brothers. We cannot be separated." This group of brothers had grown up together and were already used to sticking together. After some hesitation, everyone finally agreed with the big brother's plan. Miraculously, after making up their minds, the previous hesitation and uneasiness disappeared and turned into unparalleled excitement and anticipation. "Big brother, I have a suggestion. We should at least bring a girl." As soon as this was said, everyone laughed. The tense atmosphere dissipated and the room was filled with a cheerful atmosphere. "That's right. We should bring more than one. Haha, maybe we will become a wandering civilization in the future." In the following days, this group of brothers split up and used their connections to secretly prepare. As the migration spaceship carried a large amount of daily supplies, the things they needed could be found on the spaceship. The only problem was how to get them. With courage, money, connections, and a little bit of luck, they used various methods to gather most of the supplies they needed and completed the scouting. Soon, the day of the operation arrived. The progress was much smoother than they had imagined. Based on the information they had gathered, they sneaked into the escape pod and stepped into a medium-sized escape pod. They turned off the artificial intelligence core and switched to manual control mode. The Big Brother's palm stopped above the launch button and did not press it. Have you thought it through? As long as you press this button, there is no turning back. If we are caught, we will be treated as prisoners. We are not much different from prisoners now. The people above are looking at us more like a group of laborers. The little brother smiled freely. We have just changed the name to Human Resources. I have wanted to get rid of this identity for a long time. Nonsense. The Big Brother shook his head and laughed. He pressed the button hard. Chi. The escape pod suddenly fell and shot into space. After leaving the spaceship, everyone subconsciously turned to look outside the porthole and was suddenly stunned. They saw that the other spaceships in the migration fleet also shot out a few escape pods and scattered like scattered sparks. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. On the other side of the Kundi race's territory, the core fleet of the Kundi race jumped out of the Stargate and turned around to retrieve the Stargate used for retreating. All right, we have arrived at the target area. According to the previous secret signal, all the surviving fleets will gather in this area. In the command center, the upper echelons of the Kundi race were gathered together to check the news sent back by the other troops before the network connection was disconnected. The Scorched Earth troops have sent a report. The psionic energy has been successfully detonated, and the plan has been executed. The other fleets outside have sent a report that they are retreating in the direction we have designated. Phew, the situation is still good. The Kundi race leader heaved a sigh of relief. Seeing this, everyone's spirits were slightly better. The situation was finally back on track. Because they were worried that the information would be leaked, the command center did not dare maintain a long-term connection and gave up on real-time communication. At the same time, they did not dare to transmit orders normally for fear of being intercepted by the enemy. However, before they could catch their breath, the radar suddenly sounded. Attention, attention, an unknown large fleet has been detected ahead. Everyone suddenly turned pale with fright. Why would there be a fleet here? Could it be an ambush? Quick, see if it's the enemy. The upper echelons hurriedly passed down the order, and a few seconds later, the captain sent a report. Leaders, we have already confirmed that the other party is not the enemy but our fleet. Hearing this, the upper echelons heaved a sigh of relief and almost had a heart attack. That scared me to death. So, it's our own people. The fleet that received the order to gather should have arrived earlier. They are actually faster than us. Right at this moment, the captain spoke again, and his tone became extremely strange. Everyone, you have misunderstood. The other party is not our armed fleet but the migration fleet that we sent out a long time ago. For some reason, they all ran back. The moment he said that, the entire place fell silent. All the upper echelons were stunned for a second before their minds were thrown into chaos. Chapter 981. Didn't we tell them to leave long ago? Why are they here? Who told them to return? The Kundi race leader stood up in shock and anger. At this moment, all the upper echelons present could no longer sit still. They felt that the situation was completely out of their control. The migration fleet was the last hope of the Kundi race, and it was their weakness. The reason why they dared to start a war in their territory was because they had sent all their members away. Now that they saw their members return, all the upper echelons began to panic. Buzz. Right at this moment, a virtual screen suddenly popped up on the conference table, and a figure wearing the uniform of a high-ranking dynasty officer appeared. The gazes of all the upper echelons of the Kundi race were attracted over. This figure stood with his hands behind his back, and his voice was old but powerful. "Let me introduce myself. I am Terakov, the Marshal of the Red Empire's Exploration Army. I am the one who has been fighting with all of you." Seeing this scene, everyone present understood what was going on. They had originally thought that the enemy had only eavesdropped on their intelligence, but it seemed that it was not as simple as that. The enemy was actually able to casually send out messages, and there was an 80% chance that they had already taken control of their network. This was the worst possible situation, and everyone's minds went blank. Terakov looked at the Kundi race leader with a calm expression. "All of your intelligence is in our hands. We have already cut off the communication between your command center and the outside world. The reports that you have received during this period of time were all fabricated by us. In fact, less than a tenth of your troops are still alive, and they have all been wiped out. Don't have any unrealistic hope. We have already seen through your plan and completed the final assault a few days ago. You no longer have any strength to resist." This heart-wrenching speech crushed the confidence of most of the upper echelons present. All of them were dumbfounded and slumped onto their chairs. "Why you?" The Kundi race leader's body trembled. Terakov did not even blink as he calmly said, "Right now, I represent the Red Empire to give you an ultimatum. Our long-range psionic weapons have already been deployed and locked onto your migration fleet. I will give you 5 minutes to consider. If you choose to resist, exterminate your race. If you try to contact the migration fleet, exterminate your race. Cut off the quantum network, exterminate your race. If you do not reply after 5 minutes, exterminate your race. As long as you choose to surrender and unload all your weapons, we promise not to open fire. Your fate will be decided by you." His tone was as calm as when he went out to buy groceries in the morning. For a senior commander of the Imperium like him, wiping out an entire race would not even blink his eyes. However, in the ears of the upper echelons of the Kundi race, every word was filled with cruelty. The dynasty secretly recalled the migration fleet of the Kundi race, and another goal was to destroy the fighting spirit of the core fleet of the Kundi race. When the survival of the entire race was placed on the other end of the scale, the enemy would always crumble. This was the experience of the dynasty. Compared to the exploration era, the 3 universal civilizations no longer slaughtered civilians who could not resist. Otherwise, they would not have given them a choice. Their confidence in being lenient came from their overwhelming strength. After issuing the ultimatum, Tarakov's figure disappeared, and the screen turned into a 5-minute countdown. "It's over, it's all over. We shouldn't have started the war. Look at what we've done." As the seconds ticked by, most of the upper echelons present broke down in despair. It was not that they did not consider the situation that they were in, but before the butcher's knife fell, they all held some hope in their hearts. In front of them was a chaotic meeting room, and all the upper echelons had lost their cool. Looking at this scene, the Kundi race leader sat on his seat and slowly said, "There's no hope. Surrender." "You finally know how to surrender? What were you doing earlier?" The upper echelons that respected the leader all went all out and pointed at him. "If not for your foolishness and radicalism, would we have fallen to such a state? That's right. If we didn't start the war from the start and fled, we wouldn't have fallen into such a state. That's right. This is all because of your wrong decision. You're the sinner of our race." Looking at these upper echelons who had more or less sucked up to him venting their anger, the Kundi race leader sneered. Those who ran were always the smartest. Not only did they have to give up their home, but they also had to run far away and not cause trouble for the invaders. How generous was that? The entire race was forced to leave their homeland. Everyone was confused and panicked. If we ran away without fighting, the dignity of our race would be shattered, and it would be impossible to rebuild it again. If we could kill enough enemies or sacrifice enough soldiers, perhaps our race would be able to get rid of this decadent mentality of a loser. We would be motivated to unite against a common enemy and usher in a new golden era. Unfortunately, in the end, he did not say anything. The war ended with the Kundi race surrendering. It did not take long, and it only took 3 to 4 months from start to end. Compared to his previous life, the Red Empire had taken less than half the time to end the war. The source of this change was Han Zhao's contribution. Providing the coordinates allowed the dynasty to save the effort of searching for the enemy's base, and controlling the enemy's quantum network allowed him to crush the enemy in terms of intelligence. These two important reasons greatly accelerated the progress of the war. The change in the storyline was extremely obvious. In the records of his previous life, the Kundi race had caused quite a bit of trouble for the dynasty. However, with Han Zhao's help, the Kundi race did not cause any trouble for the dynasty. They were completely suppressed by the dynasty from start to end, unable to retaliate at all. The dynasty took over the remaining fleet of the Kundi race and sent everyone on their return journey. Flickering world. Kundi race war completed. Mission rating. Perfect. You have received 4 billion experience, 4 random rewards, plus 7,500 Red Empire contribution points, plus 1 legendary point. Star Cluster legendary point. Dust Light Star Cluster Kundi race battle meritorious member. You have participated in the battle between the dynasty's exploration army and the native Kundi race. Civilization Destroyer milestone activated. Milestone activation requirements. Participate in 3 large-scale galactic war missions related to the survival of a civilization, star system level and above, and help your side defeat the enemy. Your mission rating cannot be lower than excellent. Current progress. 1/3 dungeon spawned. Kundi race war, it's finally over. The efficiency is pretty high. Han Zhao's eyes flickered. Although he did not personally participate in the battle this time, he still managed to get a perfect mission rating with the help of the intel. The rewards were not bad. Although the experience could not be compared to the Beyond Grade A boss mission, the players would not be able to complete the Beyond Grade A challenge mission. The 4 billion experience was already a huge reward for the players in the later versions. Han Zhao was not picky about his food. He was mainly slacking this time, and the rewards were basically free. The 4 random rewards were definitely good stuff. He would continue to store them and wait for an auspicious day to do 10 consecutive draws. 7,500 dynasty contribution points was quite generous. The Kundi race was only a native civilization and did not pose much of a threat to the dynasty. Han Zhao guessed that a portion of these contribution points came from him sharing the information about the spacetime splicing technology. Although he had already learned all the ultimate knowledges, the dynasty contribution points were still very useful. He could exchange them for all sorts of rare resources or military support from the dynasty. Furthermore, if a Beyond Grade A was willing to serve the army one day, he might even have to spend contribution points to exchange for ultimate knowledges of other systems. Ultimate knowledges were monopolized by the advanced civilizations. Without a specific reason, Beyond Grade As were not allowed to exchange for ultimate knowledges of other systems, even if they had sufficient contribution points. Using ultimate knowledges to attract talents for their own organizations was equivalent to stealing business from the advanced civilizations. Thus, the Beyond Grade A allies had a tacit understanding and would not share ultimate knowledges with each other. Only with Beyond Grade A officers under their command would they have the authority to exchange for ultimate knowledges. Of course, such exceptions were extremely rare. After all, most Beyond Grade As were not willing to submit to others. Han Zhao had a deep impression of the Civilization Destroyer milestone. In the explored universe, all civilizations at the star system level and above were protected by the peace treaty, and there would almost never be a war that could wipe out an entire race. Usually, only players from the chaotic evil faction would have the opportunity to activate this milestone. The effect was not bad. When wearing the Civilization Destroyer milestone, all types of damage would be increased by 6%, attack range would be increased by 25%, and there would be an aura of deterrence. However, the price to pay to obtain this milestone was extremely high. One would have to participate in or even initiate a war of life and death with a star system civilization. This opportunity was extremely rare, and there was a high chance of being hunted after the war. Being in the lawful faction, the chances of obtaining this milestone were even lower. However, the good thing was that one would not be hunted, which gave legitimacy to one's evil deeds. Not having any political assets was within Han Zhao's expectations. The weight of the Kundi race was still a little lacking, and it was not important to the dynasty whether they were eliminated or not. However, it did increase the favorability of the upper echelons of the dynasty. Apart from Old Tower and the ruler, a large number of future dynasty generals, including Tenny, had their favorability increased as a reward for fighting alongside him. The final dungeon, Kundi Race War, was like the Secret War and the Germinal Organization. It was a series, and the various battles could be cut out to form individual dungeon crystals. Because the Kundi race was a group of younger brothers, only the Battle of the Fleet would be considered as the difficulty. Thus, the difficulty level would not be high, but the rewards would not be low. After calculating the rewards, he closed the interface and let out a sigh of relief. Perfect mechanical sense, spacetime splicing, and mission rewards. The rewards this time were extremely bountiful. The Kundi race was the only obstacle. After dealing with them, the second exploration phase would be able to proceed smoothly. Han Xiaoxin pondered. Because of his interference, the outcome of the Kundi race had changed. In his previous life, because the dynasty had spent a lot of time exploring, the Kundi race's migration fleet had enough time to move too far away, and the Kundi race army was not caught off guard like now. As they did not understand the map, the dynasty was delayed for a long time by the strategic depth of the Kundi race's territory, which gave the Kundi race more time to study the dynasty's strategy. As a result, when the dynasty infiltrated the Kundi race's command system, the Kundi race was not kept in the dark. Instead, they discovered some suspicious points and led the battle into an even more troublesome game. Thus, the Red Empire did not choose to persuade them to surrender but directly wiped out the Kundi race. Because the infiltration had been seen through, and the long journey had given them more time to react, a portion of the immigrant fleets had managed to escape, unlike now where almost all of them had been caught by the dynasty. However, this was not a good thing. What Han Xiao did not know was that the new home chosen by the Kundi race was still within the flickering world. After all, they did not have the concept of a star field. Following the exploration, the dynasty discovered the new home of the Kundi race. At that time, the dynasty had already placed great importance on the spacetime splicing technology. Thus, the new home of the Kundi race became dust in the universe, and they were secretly executed. Now, fate had reached a new fork in the road. Han Xiao stroked his chin and entered the quantum network, projecting toward Planet Lighthouse. He planned to see how the dynasty was going to deal with the Kundi race this time. In the Planet Lighthouse commander's office, two figures were seated and standing. The one standing was Terakov, and the one seated was Uranril's projection. The war had ended, and the dynasty had captured a large batch of Kundi race mantis shrimps. What they had to worry about now was how to deal with them. Whether to kill them or rear them, the ruler and the upper echelons had to make the decision. Terakov was currently reporting to Uranril and brought up the issue of the captives. The escort team is estimated to arrive at Planet Lighthouse in 7 days. Your Excellency, how should we deal with this batch of people? Uranril crossed her arms and said with a deep voice, the upper echelons have already discussed this. Some of them are in favor of exterminating the Kundi race, while others feel that we should rear them and educate them. The final decision has not been made yet. Do you have any suggestions? Terakov stroked his beard and said, the war went very smoothly. Since the enemy has chosen to surrender, I feel that there is no need to kill them. We can choose a few planets in the dynasty's territory for them to settle down in and guard them strictly. We will not allow them to enter the Galactic Society for the time being. If the results are good, we can turn them into our vassal civilization. At that time, we will release the restrictions on them entering the Galactic Society. During the war, he was decisive and would not blink no matter how many enemies he killed. However, after winning, he was not bloodthirsty. Urinril pondered and said, "If that's the case, we will have to divide their thoughts and require their leader to do something for us." "That's right. I will be preparing to interrogate their leader from afar later. By the way, our people have conducted a comprehensive check on the upper echelons of the Kundi race and discovered that there are some abnormalities in their mental state. It seems like they have been affected by the psychic current, which magnified the areas in their brains that control their anger and impulsiveness." Upon hearing that, a cold light flashed through Urinril's eyes. It's the doing of those supercluster civilizations again. Not only did they throw away their technology, but they also secretly released the psychic current. If not, they might not have been so aggressive. Who was the one most affected by the psychic current? Their leader, right? Oh, you guessed wrong. The Kundi race leader was the least affected. Urinril shook her head helplessly and said, "That's rather interesting. Is this the difference in logic between different species again?" Beep beep. Right at this moment, the communicator on the table rang. Terakov pressed on it, and his secretary's voice sounded. "Chief Commander Black Star is online. Should we connect to his remote projection? Why is he here at this time?" Terakov shook his head and said, "I am currently reporting to the ruler. Get him to wait online for a while." At this moment, Urinril waved her hands and said, "There's no need. Let him in. He is not an outsider." All right. Since the ruler did not mind, Terakov did not mind. Very quickly, Han Zhao's remote projection appeared in the room, and he immediately saw Urinril. "Your Excellency, you're here as well. Black Star, I heard about your contributions to this war. You have done well." Urinril nodded with gratification. "I only did some insignificant work," Han Zhao said humbly and looked at the two of them. "What are the two of you talking about?" "Nothing much. We are just discussing how to deal with the Kundi race. There is no conclusion for the time being." Urinril repeated the conversation and casually asked, "Black Star, do you have any suggestions?" "I don't have any opinions. I am also here to ask how the dynasty is going to deal with it." Han Zhao raised his brows. Not having any opinions is also an opinion. Urinril narrowed her eyes and did not say anything. She then turned around and gestured for Terakov to continue reporting, expressing that she did not mind Han Zhao listening in. After listening to the report, Urinril gave the two of them a few words of encouragement before going offline to meet Li Wanji. After sending the ruler away, Terakov turned around and looked at Han Zhao with a smile. "I am going to interrogate the upper echelons of the Kundi race. Since you are here, shall we go together?" "Oh, I am very busy." Han Zhao scratched his chin and said half-jokingly, "But since you invited me, I will reluctantly go with you." He was interested in leaders who were at the end of their rope and felt that he might be able to trigger a special mission, just like the Dark Star leader in the past. Chapter 982. All the armies gathered together, forming a massive fleet that escorted all the Kundi race spaceships toward Planet Lighthouse. The densely packed battleships dragged the hyperdrive streamers in a dense formation. Their exhaust flames complemented each other as if they had formed a moving sea of light, setting off bright waves in the dark universe. The dynasty's battleships were mainly scattered around the periphery. In the middle of the encirclement were tens of millions of Kundi race spaceships, carrying the entire Kundi race population. The weapons on the spaceships were all unloaded, and the power of the energy core was limited to the lowest level to ensure that the spaceships could operate. The thin shield was easily broken, and the spaceships were completely taken over by the dynasty's soldiers. These Kundi race spaceships had been modified into prison spaceships. The Kundi race flagship had been the most thoroughly modified. The cabin had been turned into a prison, and all the facilities had been removed. It had changed from a heavy industrial style to a minimalist style. Basically, only the load-bearing walls were left. The command hall had already been taken over by the dynasty's soldiers, and 2 remote projections appeared in the hall. They were Han Shao and Terakov. "Greetings, Commander-in-Chief." The moment the 2 of them came online, the greetings of the dynasty's soldiers could be heard. Han Shao was just in time. Old Terakov had already announced the plan of patrolling the captives, and the soldiers on the spaceship were all waiting to welcome him. The high-ranking dynasty officers of the various armies were also present, and they had all brought their adjutants with them. "Thank you for your hard work." Terakov smiled and nodded with a friendly attitude. These young elite officers were the future stars of the dynasty's military, and they would be the successors of the old generals. Seeing that the dynasty had so many talents, Terakov felt gratified. Han Shao looked at the officers present and could not help but raise his eyebrows. "Whoa, all of them are big shots." A group of future generals and military bigwigs stood in front of him, waiting to be inspected. It felt as though a group of people had walked down from the portraits on the wall of the dynasty's exhibition hall. Because he knew the future identities of these people, Han Shao felt that this scene was very meaningful and could not help but want to take a group photo with them. "Your Excellency Black Star, you're here too." Tenny was among them, and he greeted with a smile. It was clear that he was in a good mood. "We meet again." Han Shao nodded. Seeing that all the officers were looking over, he simply said in a clear voice, "Congratulations on winning this war. It is the Empire's honor to have such outstanding military talent." The effect of an AoE-PY attack was extraordinary. Black Star's status was there for all to see. Although he was an ally in terms of status, he now surpassed this group of young elite generals who had yet to reach their peak. No one disliked compliments. Hearing the big shot's praise, everyone's face revealed a smile of flattery. "You're too kind." The information provided by His Excellency Black Star is the cornerstone of our victory. In terms of contribution, you're the one with the greatest contribution. What we did was all manual labor. His Excellency Black Star's contribution was the main reason why we won this war so easily. It was impolite not to reciprocate. Some people immediately began to flatter each other. Of course, there were also some cold and taciturn officers who didn't open their mouths and only nodded in agreement. Han Shao responded with a smile. Suddenly, he paused and locked his eyes on the adjutant beside a dynasty general. It was God, who had a subtle smile on his face. You are." He narrowed his eyes and sized this person up. He did not have any impression of this person. Seeing this, God smiled and took the initiative to speak. "I've heard a lot about you, Your Excellency Black Star. Let's get to know each other. This is God, one of the supers that the dynasty is nurturing. I heard that he survived the primordial psionic energy explosion. He's very outstanding." Terakov introduced him to Han Shao with a smile. "Hello, God." Hearing this, Han Shao casually greeted him and secretly entered the quantum network. He opened the dynasty's internal interface, logged into his account, and searched for God's information in the dynasty's military. He was already used to checking someone's information the moment he met them. With his authority, it was not a problem for him to search for the basic information of some dynasty members. The next second, God's information popped up in his mind. Han Shao browsed through it and saw that God's clean military record was recorded. There did not seem to be any problems. He swiped down, and just as he was about to look at the more detailed information, a warning of insufficient authority popped up on the interface. "Can't see?" It seems like he's rather important. Han Shao would not be so bored as to cause the upper echelons to be unhappy by hacking into the dynasty's network. He closed the interface and fell into deep thought. Old Tower said that God was on the list of supers to be nurtured? With the size of the dynasty, the nurturing targets were basically all beyond grade A seeds or even beyond grade As. There were two types of supers that were nurtured. One was that they had special abilities, and the other was that they had outstanding potential. This fellow was at most a calamity grade super. Since he was able to survive the primordial psionic energy explosion, he was clearly a prisoner. Every Kundi race citizen felt a huge difference in their hearts. After patrolling the citizens, the two of them arrived at the area where the upper echelons were locked up. They stood outside the interrogation room of the Kundi race leader and observed him through the window. Although he was now a prisoner, the Kundi race leader sat upright and maintained his composure. He closed his eyes and rested in the interrogation room alone. After glancing at the Kundi race leader, Han Shao turned to Old Tower and said, "I'll just listen when you're interrogating him later." The one in charge of the interrogation was Old Tower. He was only there to take a look, and the Kundi race leader most likely did not recognize him. Terekov nodded, indicating that he had no objections. He then gestured to the soldier beside him. "Open the door." In the interrogation room, the Kundi race leader sat upright in his seat. He was not as calm as he looked on the surface, but he had to pretend to be calm. In his eyes, he represented the final dignity of the Kundi race. Swoosh! The door slid open and the Kundi race leader opened his eyes. He saw two figures walking in. One of them was the enemy commander, Terekov, whom he had seen before. The other person was a stranger to him. He was wearing a luxurious black windbreaker with golden patterns. From the way he was wearing it, it was obvious that he was a big shot. He had no idea where he came from. "This is the second time we've met." Terekov quickly entered his state and said with a straight face, "We have already fulfilled our promise and did not carry out a massacre. You have to tell me everything you know, including your thoughts and logic when you made the decision and the reason why you attacked us. Remember, your answer will affect how we deal with you. It's best if you don't hide anything, or I won't be the one to regret it." The virtual technology allowed them to obtain information from the other party, but they would not be able to know what the other party was thinking. This was the main point of today's interrogation. The Kundi race leader knew that this would happen sooner or later, and he did not dare hide anything. At the same time, there was no point in hiding anything. He explained everything with a heavy heart. While listening to the other party's explanation, Terekov continued to type in the report from time to time. Han Shao leaned over to take a look and saw a few words such as xenophobia, native arrogance, vengeful culture, and coexistence discomfort. These are not good terms. He blinked. This interrogation report could very well affect the dynasty's final decision on how to deal with the Kundi race, and these words were undoubtedly dangerous. After a while, the Kundi race leader finally came to an end. "Your arrival has taken away our space for development. Thus, we would rather look for a new home where we will not be disturbed than coexist with you. This will only cause us to experience a long period of passive competition, and the development of our civilization will be limited." Upon hearing this, Terekov nodded and could not be bothered to hide anything. "You're right. We will never allow you to rise. There were not many civilizations that were saints. The Red Empire did not develop the flickering world with the intention of benefiting the masses. They did not have any intention of allowing the natives to rise. The kindness they showed was only to leave some space for the natives to continue living. To most of the backward natives, this was not a bad thing. The three universal civilizations used the Galactic Society to assimilate them, which was equivalent to them receiving advanced education. However, to a civilization like the Kundi race that had a certain scale and had already begun exploring the galaxy, this was an undeniable disaster. The three universal civilizations were not interested in nurturing more natives who coveted their position, so they would definitely suppress the development of the natives. From the bottom of their hearts, the Red Empire did not hate the Kundi race for starting a war. It was perfectly justifiable for them to use force to conquer the other party's civilization. But Terekov suddenly changed the topic. Now that things have come to this, I think you should have understood that the fallen spaceship you obtained was provided by some of our opponents. Their goal is to use you as a tool to deal with us. Their information contains real technology that can be used to increase your strength. However, while the technology is real, the information about the Crimson Dynasty is a bunch of lies. They did not tell you what level of strength the Crimson Dynasty possesses and purposely made you think that you have the strength to fight them. That spaceship is like a poisonous fruit. Under the sweetness of the advanced technology there is a fatal poison. Thus, to you, obtaining psionic energy, hyperdrive, Stargate, and other technologies is equivalent to closing the gap between the two sides. You think that you have the same weapons as us. It's like an ancient person fighting a modern person with a cold weapon in their hands. Although the era is different, the outcome of the battle is still uncertain. However, the truth is that the weapons in our hands exceed yours by several iterations. It's like you are still waving your sword, but we have already destroyed you and your planet with a Star Destroyer cannon. As you can see, we originally had the possibility of coexisting peacefully. Although you will lose the space to grow, you can at least ensure the independence of your civilization. Sometimes, compromising is not a bad choice. Upon hearing this, the Kundi race leader shook his head and said with a deep voice, "Watching our path be blocked without doing anything is not the way of the Kundi race. We would rather take a gamble." Well said. A civilization without ambition has no future. I understand that you are unwilling to give up your home. Terekov did not object and nodded with praise. He then softened his tone and shook his head. "However, your only mistake is to choose the wrong opponent." The Kundi race leader lowered his head. He did not regret his choice, and his heart was still filled with hatred. However, what he hated the most was not the Red Empire but the mastermind who had used the Kundi race as a tool. In his eyes, they were the ones who had screwed over their entire race. "Alright, let's stop here. Thank you for your cooperation." At this moment, Terekov stood up and called out to Han Shao before preparing to leave the interrogation room. "Wait a moment," the Kundi race leader suddenly said with a deep voice. "You won't actually destroy us. Instead, you plan to rear us, right? Oh, that is indeed a possibility. However, we will not use the physical method that you guys used to castrate our intelligence. At most, we will attack from the cultural aspect." The Kundi race leader understood and took a deep breath. "Thus, I will definitely die, right?" Terekov paused for a moment before he nodded. "You're a symbol that allows people to vent their anger. You're a target that will be despised by our people. You're a lesson that will be left in history. You're a good propaganda tool." Han Shao shook his head upon hearing this. Thankfully, he could understand what these people were saying. If the dynasty chose to change their culture, they would have to choose a puppet to lead the Kundi race. However, the puppet would definitely not be this Kundi race leader. This fellow's purpose would be to be used as a puppet by the dynasty to put on a show of throwing the blame away. This show would end with him being executed. I understand. I have to take responsibility for my mistakes. I do not care if my name is cursed. The Kundi race leader was already prepared to die. I can fully cooperate with you guys in this show, but I have two requests. Don't look at me like that. I know that I do not have the right to make any requests, but I can only say them to you. Just treat them as my last wishes. Then speak. First, we have already surrendered, and it is fine to kill me. However, I hope that the rest of my race will be taken care of and not die. Second, the Kundi race leader's tone suddenly became sinister. I want the mastermind who made use of us to pay the price." As he said that, Terekov acted as though he did not hear anything and turned around to leave. Seeing that, the Kundi race leader lowered his head. He was clear that the other party would not accept his request. However, this might be his last chance to speak, and he did not have a choice. Right at this moment, a black figure suddenly appeared in his field of vision. The Kundi race leader raised his head and saw the man in black, who had not said a single word, walking toward him and looking down at him. However, what he heard next almost made him jump up in shock. He even suspected that there was something wrong with his ears. "I will accept your request." The Kundi race leader was stunned. Terekov stopped in his tracks and turned around with a look of shock in his eyes. Han Shao remained calm and continued speaking. "I will report to the dynasty to settle your race in my territory and take care of them. As for making the mastermind pay the price, it is not difficult either." He was someone who would not do anything without benefit. When the Kundi race leader mentioned his last wish, a new mission had popped up on his interface. The moment he saw the requirements and rewards, Han Shao made up his mind. He was going to accept this mission. "Who are you?" Hearing that, the Kundi race leader could not help but ask about Han Zhao's background. "You can call me Blackstar. As for who I am, oh, my title is a little long, and you probably won't understand what it means. How about this? You only need to know one thing." Han Shao smiled. "I alone can destroy your entire civilization." Chapter 983. You. The Kundi race leader was stunned and looked at Han Shao. A single person can defeat our Kundi race? This was the first time he had heard such a domineering self-introduction. Just what was the background of this stranger in front of him? He did not believe it subconsciously, but he immediately realized that he was facing an even more advanced civilization. The other party had a super system, and anything was possible. He had to throw away his outdated views. He did not understand Han Zhao's identity in the dynasty, but for him to dare say such words, he had to be an unimaginable figure. If that was the case, this self-introduction was really straightforward, and he immediately understood the other party's position. He was a prisoner with no bargaining power, but this big shot who he had never met before actually agreed to his last request? This was why? Pity? Charity? Or is he pretending to agree so that I can cooperate? He was filled with doubt. When he first made his request, he did not have much hope. To think that someone would really agree to his request. All of a sudden, the Kundi race leader was filled with disbelief and did not know what to say. "Are you worried that I'm joking?" Han Shao looked at him and slowly said, "To put it bluntly, you have no value in being cheated by me. Since I've promised you, I will definitely fulfill my promise." The Kundi race leader could not help but ask, "Why are you helping me?" "Good question." Han Shao chuckled and said, "I'm a person who cares for others. Just treat it as me sympathizing with the Kundi race. In any case, it's not difficult for me to deal with your request." By the side, Terekov's mouth twitched. "Brother, can we have some face? You're also partly responsible for the Kundi race's defeat. You're making it seem like we're the bad guys. The thickness of your face is probably enough to block a psionic cannon." "Oh, it really seems like it can." While Terekov was cursing by the side, the Kundi race leader was extremely touched. He was like a traveler who had reached the end of his road and was about to fall into the deepest darkness. However, in the final light of his vision, he saw someone reaching out a hand to him, willing to give him a hand. "Thank you. It is my fortune to meet someone like you at the last moment of my life. Unfortunately, I have nothing to repay you with." The Kundi race leader clenched his fists and suppressed his emotions. His tone was filled with gratitude. It's okay. I don't need anything in return." Han Shao laughed. Even he didn't believe what he said. Hearing this, the Kundi race leader was even more touched. This Black Star is really a good person who cares about the universe. But Terekov covered his face and complained helplessly. This scene was simply filled with the absurdity of fate. Their entire clan had been wiped out, yet they still had to be grateful to him. You've got me. Not only did he kill, he also wanted to kill silently. He wanted to make the enemy feel grateful to the murderer without them knowing. What kind of disgusting taste was this? At this moment, Old Ta came to a conclusion. Black Star is indeed a pervert. It's best to stay away from him in the future. I'm about to retire, and I don't want to be led astray by him. Han Shao smiled and walked out of the interrogation room with Terekov, leaving the Kundi race leader alone in the room. After walking out of the room, Terekov turned around and looked at him with confusion. Black Star, why did you agree to his request? He truly did not expect this to happen. He originally thought that Black Star was only here to be a bystander. He did not expect Black Star to suddenly do this, and he did not know what his motive was. Han Shao shrugged with a smile. I'm in a good mood today, and I want to be a good person. So, you really didn't joke around with him just now? Of course not. I'm very serious. Wait a minute, I have a bad taste? Do you have some misunderstanding about me? Ignoring Han Zhao's words, Terekov frowned. But you just expressed that you would not interfere with the dynasty's matters in front of the ruler. Now you're saying that you're going to change your attitude and support keeping these captives? There's nothing that can't change in the world. Can't I suddenly change my mind? Han Shao raised his brows. I understand. Terekov nodded. I will report your opinion to the ruler later. As for whether the higher-ups will consider it or not, it's none of my business. That's enough. Han Shao smiled. At this moment, Terekov looked around and said in a low voice, Tell me honestly, what are your intentions? Didn't I say that I'm in a good mood today? Ha. Terekov had a don't lie to me expression on his face. Seeing that, Han Shao shook his head helplessly and said, All right. I'll tell you. The population of the Kundi race is in the trillions and has reached the scale of a star cluster civilization. Although it will take a long time for them to undergo cultural changes, they will be a precious resource. If I can settle them in my territory, I will have a large amount of manpower, consumers, and soldiers in the future. The dynasty is huge and does not need the Kundi race's population. However, this is an opportunity for me to develop. Hearing that, a smile appeared on Terekov's face. That's right, this is the Black Star that I know. How could he be so kind? As expected of you. Thinking about it, Terekov felt that there was nothing wrong with Han Zhao's plan. If the dynasty wanted to keep the Kundi race, they would have to choose a place to settle them down. The population would affect the prosperity of the dynasty, and there would definitely be allies eyeing this piece of meat. The way he saw it, Black Star had already made this request. As for agreeing to the so-called last wish, he understood Han Zhao's character too well. This was most likely just an excuse. You have accepted the S-grade mission, Kundi race leader's last wish. Mission introduction. The Kundi race has lost the war and has become the captives of the dynasty. Their future is uncertain. In his despair, the Kundi race leader made his final request to you. Mission requirements. 1. Settle the Kundi race down and provide them with protection during the cultural changes. 2. Take revenge on the mastermind who used the Kundi race to deal with the Red Empire. Failure condition. The Kundi race's population is less than 80% of the original population. First requirement completed. Reward. 3 billion experience plus 10,000 Kundi race favorability, current relationship, minus 1,500 relationship. Hatred x2 random rewards plus 4 political assets, Kundi race. The Kundi race has entered the awakening era. Plus 10% super awakening rate. Second requirement completed. Reward. 1,200,000,000 experience plus 15,000 Kundi race favorability, x1 designated blank character summon card. The enemy, a proof of leadership, special skill, Kundi rage. The enemy. The more HP you lose, the higher your damage will be. This bonus can be stacked up to 25% and will reset after leaving combat. This effect can be applied to summon creatures, machinery, and equipment, proof of leadership. When you are the leader of a faction, you will receive an overall bonus. The bonus will increase according to the size and level of the faction. There is no upper limit. Kundi Rage. Upon activation, lose 5% HP/S for a maximum of 40 seconds. You will receive 2.0x Psychic Resistance, plus 5% damage, minus 5% anti, minus 20% CHA, and minus 10% LUK. At the same time, you will be immune to all abnormal mental states other than rage. Cooldown, 5 minutes. Let the flames of rage fill your mind. As soon as he saw the mission description, Han Xiao decided that he had to do this mission no matter what. The reward was beyond his expectations, and it gave him a big surprise. It was simply too generous. Han Xiao did not have any expression on his face, but he was overjoyed in his heart. While the leader of the Kundi race was not a super, his identity as the leader of a star cluster civilization meant that he would receive extremely high rewards. The first requirement was the normal random reward and experience. What Han Xiao cared about was the 4 political asset reward. Apart from increasing the efficiency of gaining experience, it also meant that he would have a say in the Kundi race. The dynasty wanted to turn the Kundi race into a vassal civilization, but even if they were crippled, they would still have the foundation of a star cluster civilization. What Han Xiao had said to Terakov was not false. If the Kundi race was located in his territory, their large population would provide him with many benefits. After completing this mission, the Kundi race would enter a new era, and their super awakening rate would increase. Although 10% did not seem like much, it was not a small number when it involved billions of people. The reward also included a high favorability with the Kundi race, and their relationship would rise to reverence. This meant that the Kundi race would become his ally to a certain extent, and supers were equivalent to a source of soldiers. However, most of the Grade S missions had very simple introductions. The first requirement was to provide protection, and there was no mention of how long it would take for the mission to be considered complete. Han Xiao estimated that he would have to wait until the dynasty removed the seal on the Kundi race. Thus, it would take a long time for him to complete the mission. However, the second requirement was different. According to the Kundi race leader's request, the goal was to take revenge on the mastermind who made use of them. What made Han Xiao decide to accept the mission was the reward for the second requirement. Needless to say, the designated character summon card was a good thing, and the 3 abilities that were rewarded almost blinded him. The enemy was an extremely practical talent that was extremely suitable for him. To an ordinary person, the lower their health, the higher the damage dealt. When the damage was stacked to the highest, they would only have a sliver of health left, which was equivalent to going berserk on the verge of death. However, with Han Xiao's health recovery rate, he would be able to recover back to full health in a matter of minutes. This 25% damage increase was like a gift from the heavens. Furthermore, it was also suitable for summoned creatures and machinery, directly increasing the damage output of the entire mech legion. Proof of leadership was one of the most powerful abilities. In Han Xiao's previous life, it was extremely famous among the players and had the title of half-template. Players could have this ability as well. As the leader of a faction, they would be able to activate the effect of this talent, which was very similar to a template. Players could also create their own armed forces like supers and recruit ordinary NPCs. Guilds were also a type of faction, and they would be recognized by this talent. In the future versions, players would have a stable channel to obtain proof of leadership. In order to activate this talent, a large number of players would create their own factions or guilds, and their lives would enter a new stage. The bonus of this talent depended on the size of the faction. To normal players who had no money, time, or charisma, even if they had this talent, it would not be of much use. Only some tycoons, studios, and large guilds would be able to utilize this talent the best. Very few people would be able to obtain a significant bonus. In his previous life, Han Xiao had never activated Proof of Leadership as a lone wolf. However, he was very clear that the bonus of Proof of Leadership was extremely powerful. If I had this talent now, the effect would be unimaginable. Han Xiao was secretly excited. He was extremely passionate about any ability that could greatly increase his strength. The last ability, Kundi's Rage, also made his eyes light up. It was also a good ability. The 2.0x bonus to mental resistance was equivalent to doubling his mental resistance. It was extremely impressive. Mental resistance had always been Han Xiao's weakness. Any ability that could increase his mental resistance would attract his attention. Furthermore, during the duration of the skill, he would be immune to all negative mental statuses. It was extremely overpowered and basically meant that he would be immune to all mental control skills. The skill depleted his HP. He would lose 5% of his HP every second, and his HP would be emptied in 20 seconds. This status could only last for a maximum of 40 seconds. The percentage of HP loss was very high, and normal people would only be able to activate it for a few seconds at most. However, Han Xiao's HP regeneration was not low either. According to his total HP, under the most ideal circumstances, the HP regeneration from HP to MP regeneration was equivalent to around 10% HP per second. If he could hold on, activating it for 40 seconds would not be a problem for Han Xiao. The only thing that confused Han Xiao was the name of the skill. Since he was enraged, shouldn't he increase his attack power? Why did he increase his resistance? Could this be incompetent rage? The legendary, kill me if you have the ability? These three skills are very practical. As long as I can complete the mission, my actual combat power will increase by a lot. Especially a Proof of Leadership, the sooner I obtain it, the better. Han Xiaoxin calculated. The second requirement was to take revenge on the mastermind. The mission did not explain to what extent the revenge would be considered a success. He had to figure out the method himself, just like the Ghidorah's lineage mission. However, such a generous reward was really tempting, and Han Xiao decided to try his best to complete this mission. He was extremely happy that he had such a pleasant surprise on this trip. After deactivating the remote projection and returning to his office, Terekov immediately contacted Urinril and sent her the interrogation record. At the same time, he reported Han Xiao's actions to the ruler. You're saying that after Black Star inspected the captives, he changed his attitude and expressed his support for educating them? Yes. Urinril fell into deep thought. What's the reason? He said that it's for the population. Terekov repeated what Han Xiao had said. Urinril narrowed her eyes and nodded. Since it's the opinion of an ally, we have to consider it carefully. In terms of the benefits of the dynasty, Black Star's position was far higher than the defeated Kundi race. After all, national pillars were rare, but there were many vassal races. Furthermore, Black Star was an important contributor to this war, and his opinion would be valued by the dynasty. In truth, to the dynasty, settling the Kundi race down was an extremely simple matter and was not that important. There was no problem in placing them in the territory of the Black Star Corps. Not only would they increase the population of their allies' territory, but they would also be able to help monitor them. However, Black Star was not their only ally, and they had to balance the opinions of all parties before deciding if they should give this piece of meat to Black Star. As for dealing with the mastermind, it was not only the Kundi race's leader's idea, but also the dynasties as well. While their opponent was the Kundi race, the supercluster and star cluster civilizations that had given away the technology were the true culprits, and the dynasty did not have the habit of letting them off. Even without mentioning the reason for revenge, the exploration of the flickering world had yet to end, and if the enemies who were scheming in the dark were to create more native civilizations, it would greatly hinder the progress of the dynasty. Regardless of whether it was for public or private reasons, the dynasty would not allow the mastermind to continue causing trouble. Han Zhao's attitude was exactly what the dynasty wanted. Since that's the case, we have to investigate which organization threw the spaceship to the Kundi race. A cold light flashed through Yurenril's eyes. Chapter 984. The Kundi race war took place in the flickering world, and the dynasty kept the process of the war a secret. Thus, this matter did not cause much of a stir in the explored universe, and not many people cared about it. Only a few special organizations were paying attention to it. Primeval Star River, Three King Planet. This was one of the landmarks of the Primeval Star River and the capital planet of the Modo civilization. The Modo civilization was also known as the Modo Three King Federation, one of the 4 supercluster civilizations that controlled the Primeval Star River. The Three King Federation referred to the Modo civilization's national situation, dating back to the exploration era. At that time, the main race of the Modo civilization was still the Modo people. During the exploration era war, the Modo people tried to swallow the other 2 powerful civilizations by force. However, they did not have the strength that the dynasty had against the Kundi race, so they could only slowly devour them. The war dragged on for a very long time, and all 3 parties had other enemies eyeing them from the outside. Under the internal and external threats, the 3 parties chose to stop the war and make concessions. The strongest Modo did not need to return all the territories they had conquered. Thus, the borders of the 3 parties connected, and after they resumed trade and daily life, the races of the 3 parties started to live together, showing signs of integration. After that, the situation of the exploration era war became more and more dangerous. The Modo people and their 2 old rivals felt the strain, and because their territories were close, the 3 parties protected each other's back. After a long discussion, they finally decided to form an alliance and help each other, hoping to survive the dangerous exploration era war. As the flames of war spread, the 3 parties gradually expanded outward, and their territories, technology, economy, and military all reached the star cluster level. Furthermore, none of the 3 parties were xenophobic. During the long war, the situation of racial integration became more and more obvious, and the upper echelons also intermarried to a certain extent. If this continued, the 3 parties might become like the 3 universal civilizations, working together and scheming against each other. However, they were not the winners of the exploration era and could only listen to the rules of the 3 universal civilizations. No one was allowed to fight. After the war ended, what followed was the splitting of the benefit. The surviving advanced civilizations of the various star fields finally started to establish order. In order to establish their position in the new era, every advanced civilization became extremely active in the diplomatic and political arena. At that time, there were 3 supercluster civilizations that were the strongest in the Primeval Star River. The Modo civilization and the other 2 civilizations were only at the star cluster level and did not have the qualifications to become the star field manager. The 3 families thought about it. Since you slept with my older brother and I married your older sister, they were basically one family. Their territories were connected, and their races were integrated quite well. Then, they might as well merge. This way, they would have a chance to obtain the title of supercluster civilization, and they would have a lot more say. When the other star cluster civilizations heard this, they immediately objected. Since the 3 of you want to merge, should we merge too? Isn't this cheating? peaceful merging of civilizations was rare, but it was not unheard of in the exploration era. Peaceful merging required a foundation, and the three families of the Modo civilization happened to have the qualifications to do so. The three of them had maintained a political alliance for many years, and their races were also highly integrated. The mixed blood population made up 24% of the total population, and their economy and culture were very well integrated. In the end, after a series of complicated operations, the Modo civilization's merger application was approved by the three tyrants. This established the rule of three leaders representing their respective star cluster civilizations, and the number of supercluster civilizations in the primeval Star River increased to 4. The Modo civilization fulfilled their wish of becoming the star field manager. After developing to this point, the Modo civilization had completely stabilized their qualifications to be a supercluster civilization. They were one of the strongest civilizations in the explored universe. At this moment, on the capital planet, the three kings of the Modo civilization were gathered together, listening to a report. Intelligence shows that the dynasty has recalled their troops, which means that the natives have been dealt with. After 116 days, the dynasty's casualties are minimal. There was only one figure in the conference room. A mixed-blood upper echelon wearing an official uniform stood in the middle of the room and read the report to the projection of the three kings on the virtual screen. He was thin and sinister, and his entire person was emitting a gloomy and cold aura. This person was called Mati, an upper echelon of the Modo civilization. He was in charge of espionage and secret operations. Like the other supercluster civilizations, the Modo civilization had also sent stowaways to the flickering world, and Mati was the person in charge of this project. The plan to use the Kundi race to destroy the Red Empire was proposed by him, and the plan to send the stowaways to the Red Empire was also decided by him. Those natives are too useless. They can't even cause the dynasty to lose more troops. One of the leaders shook his head. Natives are just natives after all. We can't expect too much from them. Mati was expressionless. The life and death of the Kundi race were not within his consideration. They were just a tool to be used. What's your next plan? I have already gotten the stowaways in the flickering world to continue exploring and find the next native civilization that we can use, Mati said calmly. With this native as an example, the other supercluster civilizations will copy our actions. Not only will we create more trouble for the dynasty, but we can also use the dynasty to eliminate our future competitors. Oh, it's best not to let the dynasty find out that we were the ones who planned this, another leader said in a low voice. Don't worry, Your Excellencies. A cold smile appeared on Mati's face. I have already made arrangements. The dynasty won't find out who did it. A few days later, the dynasty troops finally returned to Planet Lighthouse with the Kundi race. The upper echelons of the dynasty also decided on a plan and informed Han Shao about it. The dynasty has decided to place the Kundi race in your territory for cultural transformation. During this period, they will be cut off from the Galactic Society, and you will be in charge of them. Tarakov brought this good news through the communicator, and Han Shao, who was teasing Philip, smiled. All right, leave it to me. Thank the ruler for me. Han Shao nodded. Such a decision meant that the dynasty had balanced the opinions of the various parties and was willing to let him obtain the resources of the Kundi race. Urinril's opinion definitely played a key role in this. This way, the first requirement of the mission is basically fulfilled. Han Shao mumbled to himself. There will be someone who will contact your Black Star Corps. Tarakov nodded and changed the topic. There's something else that I have to tell you. The dynasty is currently investigating the mastermind behind using the Kundi race, but there are very few clues. The spaceship that crashed was a common model, and we are unable to find its serial number. We have to first find the stowaways who dropped the spaceship, and we might need your help in this regard. Of course. Han Zhao's eyes lit up. He was more than willing to help out in this matter. Finding the identity of the mastermind was a prerequisite for completing the mission. The group of stowaways had probably escaped to the unexplored star field, and finding them was no different from finding a needle in a haystack. In this regard, he would probably have to ask Aesop for help. While the mission description was vague, he was certain that the dynasty's sanctions alone would not be able to fulfill the second requirement of the mission. In the end, he would still have to rely on himself. This means that I will have to go up against a star cluster or even a supercluster. Han Zhao's eyes sparkled. Of course there would be danger, but it was not without an advantage. After all, the three universal civilizations loved to bully these supercluster the most. Thus, it might not be a problem if I go overboard. Han Xiaoxin thought to himself. By the way, the live broadcast of the upper echelons of the Kundi race is about to begin. They will mention you. Do you want to watch it together? Sure. Han Xiao put away his thoughts and nodded. At the same time, on the Kundi race flagship, a member of the dynasty's intelligence bureau, wearing a red military uniform and black gloves, walked into the cell of the Kundi race leader and threw down a document. The Kundi race leader, who was resting against the wall, slowly opened his eyes and picked up the document in front of him. He read it carefully, then closed the document and said slowly, "I'm not sure. Is this the ending you have prepared for me? I will cooperate well." "I know, but we still need some insurance." The dynasty intelligence officer pressed down on the head of the Kundi race leader and planted a psychic bomb. This would not affect the independent consciousness of the Kundi race leader, but it could be remotely controlled to prevent him from changing his mind. "I have already made an agreement with His Excellency Black Star, and will not act recklessly. This is unnecessary." The Kundi race leader shook his head. The dynasty intelligence officer did not reply and said with a deep voice, "Follow me. It's time. The live broadcast is ready." Letting out a breath, the Kundi race leader stood up and tidied his clothes. After tidying up for a full minute and ensuring that there was no trace of dust on his clothes, he raised his head and walked out of the cell to welcome his death. P.S. A new month has begun. It should enter 4:0 at the beginning of the month. Looking for a guaranteed monthly vote, ****. Chapter 985. A large number of civilians were locked up in the cabin of the Kundi race flagship, and the ground was covered with simple mattresses. They were either sitting or lying down, with their backs against each other. It was extremely crowded, just like a refugee camp. Swoosh! The hatch opened, and a group of service-type housekeeping robots pushed a cart in. There were buckets of mushy food on the cart. "It's time to eat," the dynasty soldier on duty shouted, and the crowd became restless. Ever since they were locked up, these Kundi race civilians had been living in fear of their future. However, they were not tortured in terms of material matters. The dynasty gave them food on time, and they did not mistreat the captives. This made the Kundi race civilians much calmer, and none of them did anything unwise. The housekeeping robots shuttled through the crowd and distributed food to everyone. These captives all sat up, holding the warm and nutritious porridge and gobbling it down. They whispered to each other and chatted in twos and threes. The atmosphere was quite peaceful. In the crowd, two Kundi race individuals, one big and one small, were huddled together. The small one was obviously a child of the Kundi race, and he was eating porridge in small mouthfuls. The adult female Kundi race individual beside him poured half of the porridge in her bowl to the child. Seeing this, the child raised his head and said, "Mommy, aren't you eating? You eat first. I'll eat after you're full." The adult female Kundi race individual looked at him gently. The two of them were mother and son. "No, let's eat together." The child shook his head and mumbled, "If only Daddy was here. Mommy, where did he go?" Hearing this, his mother fell silent. Seeing that her child was staring at her, she forced a smile and said, Your daddy might be on another spaceship and won't be able to come and see us. When we settle down, he will come and find us." "That's great, I miss him so much." The child was overjoyed. "Then, when can we settle down?" "Probably soon." Her smile became more and more forced. She clearly did not have any confidence in her heart, but she had to pretend to be confident. She forced herself to console the child. Seeing that the child continued to eat, she turned her face away and wiped away the tears that almost flowed out. She was clear that her husband might have died, because she was the wife of an officer. After the war started, she and her child were sent away as the family of the soldiers. Because of the Empire's manipulation, they were sent back and became prisoners. While the dynasty had sealed off all news, it was not difficult for her to imagine the losses the Kundi race had suffered on the battlefield. Unable to communicate with the outside world, she did not know whether her husband was dead or alive. She still held on to the last bit of hope, but in front of her child, she had to forcibly endure her confusion, anxiety, and uneasiness. She could not show it, and her heart was under great pressure. In the dead of the night, after the child had gone to sleep, she was the kind of person who would weep quietly with tears. She did not know how this civilization called the Red Empire would deal with them, so she could only lie to her child. At this moment, rows of virtual screens suddenly popped up around the shipyard, attracting everyone's attention. All the screens flashed simultaneously, and a familiar figure appeared. "Yes, leader." There was a commotion in the crowd. Many people stood up and stared at the screen. The same scene played out on all the Kundi race prison spaceship. After the dynasty had sealed off all news, most of them did not know about the current situation. This was the first time they had received news from the outside world, and it was the first time they had seen their leader on television. The mother also hurriedly put down her food and pulled her child to the side to watch. On the screen, the Kundi race leader faced the camera and slowly opened his mouth. "My brethren, I have a piece of heavy news to announce. We have completely lost this war, and about 70% of our military strength has been wiped out. The numbers of the fleets that have died or gone missing are as follows." He then read out a long list of the names of those who had died, and all the families of the soldiers immediately tensed up, afraid that they would miss out on a single number. As the numbers of the fleets were read out one by one, there would be people who would collapse to the ground in despair from time to time, and heart-wrenching cries could be heard from the crowd. The child was in a daze as he listened. All of a sudden, he felt his mother's body sway and almost pulled him down. He hurriedly turned around and grabbed his mother's hand. "Mother, what's wrong?" "I am fine." The mother's body was trembling slightly. If she was a human, her face would have turned pale. She held onto her child's shoulder with much difficulty and forced herself to maintain a calm tone. However, she could not hide the trembling in her voice. Just a moment ago, she had heard the name of the fleet that her husband had served in from the Kundi race leader's mouth. Her last bit of hope had been shattered, and she almost fainted on the spot. Thinking that her child was still beside her, she forcefully suppressed her emotions. At this moment she could not even cry. Her entire body was numb, and her heart was dead. The sound of crying filled the room, and a sorrowful atmosphere filled the room. After reading out the list of the names of those who had died, the Kundi race leader said with a deep voice, "I have to bear the main responsibility for the loss of this war. The failure of my decision and that of the upper echelons resulted in today's outcome. Actually, this war could have been avoided. The one who started the war was not the enemy but me. The Red Empire came from afar to explore the unknown. They are actually a civilization that loves peace, but their arrogance and enmity blinded my heart. I was made use of by a third party and viewed the Red Empire as an enemy. I wanted to strike first and gain the upper hand. Thus, I arranged for an attack and incurred the wrath of the Red Empire. We originally had the chance to coexist peacefully without war or bloodshed. There was only the mixing of cultures. It was a pity that because of my mistake, we lost this future. My arrogance destroyed the bridge between the two sides. Everything that has happened today is my responsibility. My mistake in decision has sent the entire civilization into the abyss. As he said that, he took out a document. It was the confidential information of the first psionic bomb trap as well as the casualty statistics of the dynasty's exploration team. This was proof that he was not lying. Following which, the Kundi race leader stood up and bowed deeply to the camera. I have personally ruined the lives of all of you. Countless families have been destroyed because of this war. I am sorry. Hearing this, everyone understood that this was a declaration of his own guilt. At the same time, he was explaining the reason for this war to the people. Looking at this scene, many people were enraged. Sorry? You caused the entire race to be in such a state. What's the use of saying sorry? If you did not start this war, those soldiers would not have died, and we would still be able to live a normal life. How would we be reduced to prisoners? It's all because of you that our civilization is facing a life and death crisis, and all of this could have been avoided. You think that a single apology is enough? After apologizing, the Kundi race leader returned to his seat and continued speaking with an expressionless face. I know that all of you are very concerned about how the Red Empire will deal with us. My fellow comrades, please be at ease. The Red Empire is a civilization that is more advanced than us. They will not slaughter the civilians and will not castrate our intelligence. They have decided to release us and settle us down in another star system. They will allow us to regain our freedom and help us build a new home. Hearing this, everyone's tense nerves relaxed. This was the question that they were most concerned about. They were already extremely lucky to be able to keep their lives. To think that the other party was actually willing to release them and return their freedom to them. It seems like the Red Empire is indeed a peace-loving civilization. This thought surfaced in some people's minds. Their side was the one who started the war, so they were in the wrong first. The Empire treated the captives kindly, so after comparing the two, everyone's hatred for the Empire decreased slightly. Of course, there was no such thing as rationality and objectivity. Even though they were the ones who started the war, the majority of the Kundi race still harbored hatred for the dynasty. Among them, the family members of the soldiers who had died hated the dynasty the most. However, because of this explanation, their anger was mostly directed at the Kundi race leader. At this moment, the Kundi race leader took out a document with Han Zhao's life history written on it. This was information provided by the dynasty. Our new home is the territory of an important figure from the Red Empire. His name is Black Star, and he will provide us with protection. This is a respectable figure, and it was because of his attitude that the dynasty decided to return our freedom. Everyone looked at Han Zhao's image on the document and remembered this person who had spoken up for them. On the other side, in Planet Lighthouse's office, Han Zhao's projection was watching the Kundi race leader's speech with Terekov. Upon seeing this, he glanced at Terekov with a smile. Your help is truly thorough. Not only did you give me the resources of the Kundi race, you even helped me build up my image for free. You're welcome. Terekov took a sip of the plant-based, nourishing drink and smiled. The speech was still going on, and the Kundi race leader introduced the situation of their new home. He misleadingly looked at the future and did not mention anything about the cultural changes and sealing of the galactic network before changing the topic. The upper echelons have to bear a huge responsibility for this, and all the upper echelons involved will be executed. I will use this as a warning and reflect on this lesson. I will use a more rational method to continue leading the race and build our new home. Boom! The moment this was said, the crowd broke out into an uproar. What right does he have to continue leading us after making such a huge mistake? He executed all the upper echelons but did not receive any punishment himself. He's too hypocritical. Is he not going to let go of the position of leader no matter what? Almost everyone was enraged. The race has already been reduced to such a state because of you. What right do you have to continue being the leader? Did we agree to it? All the other upper echelons were executed, and all you gave us was a simple, "I'm sorry"? What's the point? Even if you don't die, you should at least step down. To be so thick-skinned as to continue being the leader, isn't it all because of your desire for power? The race has been defeated, but you're still sitting in this position. What right do you have? It seemed like he was blaming himself, but he was actually pushing all the blame to the other upper echelons. At this moment, the Kundi race leader stood up and revealed a formal smile. I will head to every spaceship to comfort you and encourage you. I hope to give you the courage to start anew. Failure is not scary. I can make the Kundi race great again. These words should have been inspiring, but at this moment, almost everyone was staring at the Kundi race leader on the screen. The Kundi race leader stood up and walked out with the mechanical camera following him. At this moment, the door of the spaceship opened, and a member of the Kundi race walked in. The civilians present all turned around and whispered among themselves. Who is this person? How can he move freely? I know him. He is one of the secretaries beside the leader. He has appeared on television before. The secretary clapped his hands and got everyone to quieten down before speaking. Everyone, the leader will be here to comfort you. I hope that everyone will be grateful and raise the leader's image. Everyone present was enraged. You still want to put on a show at such a time? We have just found out that our loved ones have died in the war, and we still have to cooperate with you and show gratitude? Many of them clenched their fists and trembled in anger. They did not know how to describe their feelings. Their anger and disdain toward the leader had reached its peak. Very quickly, footsteps could be heard from outside the spaceship, and the door opened once more. The Kundi race leader walked in with his secretary and a group of subordinates beside him. He had a smile on his face. Seeing his smile, many people were so angry that their crayfish was about to boil. Still smiling? What the F***ck? However, looking at the subordinates beside the Kundi race leader, no one dared to say anything. They could only glare at him with hatred. Sweeping his gaze across the crowd, the Kundi race leader maintained his smile and spoke. Everyone, how have you been during this period? I know that you must be in a daze. Don't worry, you can tell me if you have anything on your mind. Whoosh! Just as he was speaking, a black object suddenly flew out from the crowd and smashed onto the Kundi race leader's spotless clothes. Everyone looked down and saw that it was a rice bowl. The nutrition paste inside had all spilled out and stuck onto the Kundi race leader's clothes. Scram! An angry voice sounded from the crowd. With someone taking the lead, the others immediately followed suit and threw the rice bowls at the Kundi race leader. Pa 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 pa! Balls of nutrition paste landed on the Kundi race leader's clothes one after another. His clothes became sticky, and his original color could not be seen. It was as though he had just been scooped out of a pile of paste. Stop! Stop! The subordinates of the Kundi race leader hurriedly blocked the rice bowls and protected the Kundi race leader. At this moment, the civilians behind also wanted to throw the food bowls at the Kundi race leader. They raised their rice bowls and squeezed forward, causing the human wall to push forward. Don't push. Move aside. One of the subordinates shouted and pushed the crowd in front of him. He could not help but increase his strength. All of a sudden, a female was pushed out by him and fell to the ground. The next moment, a tender roar sounded from the crowd. You hit my mother. I'll fight it out with you. This subordinate suddenly felt a sharp pain on his leg. Looking down, he saw a child hugging his leg tightly and biting his leg. The child's teeth had pierced through his carapace. Scram! He shivered in pain and could not help but slap the child's face, sending him to the side. When the surrounding people saw this scene, their emotions exploded. You guys dare to hit a child? Beat them up. Everyone could no longer hold back their anger, and they suddenly exploded. Their rationality instantly collapsed, and everyone pounced forward with a roar, using their fists, teeth, and carapace to attack. The crowd was agitated, and the situation turned into a bloodbath. The situation had completely gone out of control. Bang! The Kundi race leader was pushed to the ground by a group of people, and he was in so much pain that his entire body curled up. Right at this moment, he felt a sharp pain in his neck. Someone had bitten down on him, and the sharp teeth had pierced through his carapace and into his throat. Blood flowed out like a fountain. The Kundi race leader's body trembled, and he looked over. The one biting his throat was a female Kundi race member. It was the mother of the child that had been beaten up. The other party refused to let go, and the look in her eyes was deeply imprinted into his mind. What a pair of eyes filled with anger, hatred, and despair, Katja! She tore the Kundi race leader's throat apart and held it in her mouth. She then raised her head and let out a sharp roar. Blood flowed out from his throat, and the Kundi race leader's body gradually lost its strength. Looking at the members of his race who were ravaging his body, he felt an unprecedented calmness in his heart. Finally, the show is over. Dong! His brain was suddenly hit by a heavy object, and his consciousness disappeared completely. The dynasty soldiers on duty immediately intervened and controlled the rioting crowd. However, they purposely slowed down the pace and allowed the chaos to continue for a while. Finally, this bloodbath was stopped by the dynasty soldiers. Pools of blood were left on the ground, and more than 10 people collapsed on the ground. Everyone immediately saw the corpse of the Kundi race leader, which was tattered beyond recognition. The rioting scene was recorded by the floating camera, and the Kundi race members on the other spaceships all saw this scene. They actually killed him. Well done. A sinner like him shouldn't continue living. This is the only way to punish him. Many of them felt extremely satisfied. In the corridor outside the cabin, a black-gloved Dynasty intelligence officer was leaning against the wall and casually tossing a small emotional stimulation device. Hearing that the commotion inside had stopped, he grabbed the emotional stimulation device and turned it off. He then placed it in his pocket and left. This show is over. Tarakov turned off the virtual screen. You guys really made the best use of everything. Han Shao curled his lips and said, instead of letting the dynasty execute him, the Kundi race killed their leader. This matter will forever remain in the history of the Kundi race and become an unforgettable negative example. In a short period of time, those Kundi race members might feel satisfied, but this matter will forever remain in their minds. The spirit of the entire race will collapse because of this matter, and it will be more convenient for you guys to carry out cultural changes. Compared to exterminating the entire race, this is much gentler. Tarakov was expressionless, and after a long silence, he suddenly turned around and looked into Han Zhao's eyes. Black Star, find the mastermind behind this. Han Shao crossed his legs, crossed his arms, and nodded slowly. Leave it to me. I recently accepted Huawei's invitation to attend an event. The location is Dazzling Square Experience Store, Gusu District, 1588, Huchi Road, August 4, 1600. At QQ Group 755138511 for registration. Verified message, Sunday meetup. Limited to 50 spots. First come, first serve. Those who are interested can come and play with me, =, smiley face. Chapter 986. 10 days later, the Dynasty's fleet and the Black Star Corps escorted all the Kundi race civilians to the Odoran star system in the Geru star cluster. This was one of the territories of the Black Star. The handover between the Black Star Corps and the Dynasty was very smooth, and Han Shao chose to settle the Kundi race in this star system. With land in his hands, he was not worried at all. With a wave of his hand, he temporarily lent over 100 habitable planets to the Kundi race. The population of each planet was around 10 billion. With the productivity of the galactic society, a planet was more than enough to accommodate 10 billion people. The living conditions were not bad, but compared to the original situation of the Kundi race, it was undoubtedly much more crowded. Before obtaining the Stargate technology, the Kundi race was lame and had poor mobility in the universe. This resulted in the efficiency of transporting people being too low. The Kundi race might have occupied a few star systems and thousands of colonized planets, but due to the limitations of space, most of the colonized planets did not have a large population. Those who went there would basically just stay there, and would not be many people. At this moment, the fleet released the Dynasty's planet modification package and quickly built simple cities on the surface. They then landed and transported all the Kundi race civilians to these planets in batches. On the landing platform on the ground, countless Kundi race immigrants obediently followed the Dynasty's instructions and walked out of the spaceship, stepping onto the unfamiliar land. It was as though the hatch of the spaceship had been opened, forming a sea of people that stretched as far as the eye could see. Countless people looked left and right curiously, sizing up their future home. At the same time, in the command hall of the Black Star Palace, countless staff members in army uniforms were working in their respective positions. In front of the hall, there was a huge screen made up of hundreds of small virtual screens that was monitoring the migration situation of every planet. Han Shao stood in the middle of the hall with his hands behind his back. He looked up and saw all the surveillance images. Moving the entire population of a star cluster civilization is truly a huge project. Aurora sighed with her hands on her waist. After the death of the Kundi race leader, they had no leader and could only listen to orders. Thus, the migration was very smooth. Herluz nodded. He had also followed the fleet over. He had not seen Han Shao for a long time and missed him greatly. He would occasionally look at Han Zhao's back view. There weren't many accidental casualties. Very good. Han Shao nodded. Sylvia's remote projection flicked her hair and asked softly, "How are we going to make use of this sudden population?" Han Shao rubbed his chin and slowly said, "These people are not going to be of immediate use. These resources won't be of any use immediately. The dynasty has made arrangements for them, and they will be in charge of cultural transformation. During the transformation period, the Kundi race's communication network will be blocked, and they will not be allowed to connect to the Galactic Society and develop technology. The only suitable thing to impart is super knowledge. We have to let them grow slowly. The time for these people to be of use has not come yet. We have to keep them for the time being. After the dynasty's ban is lifted, they will be the Black Star Army's talent reserve base and an important source of troops. The population of the Kundi race numbered in the trillions, which was more than the members of the entire army. If they wanted to harvest so many leek seeds, they would have to plant them first. Thus, they had to increase the status of the Black Star Corps in the hearts of the Kundi race. Although the reward of the Last Wish mission included a large amount of faction favorability points, it was also necessary for them to build up their thoughts. Speaking up to this point, Han Shao suddenly paused and pondered. Also, spread the teachings of the machinery faith among the Kundi race and try to get more people to worship the machinery faith. During the modification period, the Kundi race would not be able to go online and would be isolated from the rest of the world. There was no better environment than this to spread their religion, and the machinery faith could be used as a foreign religion to attack the faith of the Kundi race. Without the interference of information from the outside world, their only target of worship would naturally be themselves. This way, the Kundi race could become a treasure land that provided energy for the key of Adeptus Adeptus. To the other mechanics, developing new believers was the best way to activate the key of Adeptus Adeptus Adeptus. Although the efficiency of spreading their religion was low, it was better than nothing. What Manison wanted was the faith of the current believers, which was the biggest piece of meat. Other than that, he was very happy to see others spreading their religion. After all, he was sitting in the position of the strongest mechanic, and it would only benefit him if the plate expanded. There would definitely be believers flowing to him, and he would not lose out no matter what. To Madison, developing new believers was like planting leeks for him, and he only had to harvest them at the right time. Thus, as long as they did not want to snatch his position as the main god of the machinery faith, Madison would not appear. He could not wait for the machinery faith to have more believers. Just as everyone was chatting casually, one of the operators beside them reminded them. "Army Commander, the migration is complete." Han Shao turned to look at the screen, which showed that all the Kundi race civilians had stepped onto the surface. "It's done. Release the virtual screen." The moment he said that, the spaceships of the various planets projected a virtual screen above the heads of the Kundi race immigrants, and everyone looked up. Han Zhao's figure appeared on every screen with a smile on his face. He then opened his mouth and spoke in a loud voice. "Friends of the Kundi race, I am Black Star. From now on, I will be in charge of settling all of you down. Thus, for a long time in the future, you will often see me on the television. Today, all of you will be moving to a new home. These planets are all my territory, and you can seek help from the Black Star Corps members stationed on the various planets at any time. You don't have to worry about your safety. I also express my regret for what happened to all of you. The dynasty is currently investigating the mastermind who made use of all of you. I will do my best to find them and punish them to seek justice for all of you. In any case, I hope that all of you will be able to get rid of the pain of the past and embrace a new life as soon as possible." Han Shao did not give a long speech. He did not have the qualifications to make the Kundi race feel grateful, so he did not say much. The virtual screen then disappeared, and the Kundi race immigrants looked at each other with a slight commotion. Compared to the dynasty, most of them had a decent impression of Black Star, but they could not be considered friendly. Did he say that he would help them seek justice? They did not know if he was just joking. After experiencing such a huge change, the Kundi race already found it hard to believe the promises of outsiders. After ending his simple speech, Han Shao nodded toward Herluz, who then walked out of the room. After a while, footsteps could be heard from outside the hall. Herluz brought a group of graduates with Nero as the leader. They had returned with the fleet and were now meeting with Han Shao. "You guys are here." Han Shao looked at this group of students. After 4 months of experience in the flames of war, many of them had shed the childishness they had when they first met them. Their temperaments had changed a lot. After falling into the trap of the enemy, Nero had learned his lesson and reflected on his actions. He now had a more mature aura, and Mia also seemed much more capable. However, Han Shao could not help but look down at the hands of this adulterous couple. Sensing Han Zhao's gaze, Mia awkwardly let go of her hands and pretended to play with her hair. The two of them were originally classmates and close friends, but their relationship was a little ambiguous. However, after the previous incident, the ambiguity index had skyrocketed. Although no one had revealed the truth, they had been behaving like a real couple recently. Why do I feel like I've become a matchmaker? Han Zhao's mouth twitched, and he calmed himself down before praising them. "Seeing the changes in all of you, I'm very pleased. You are now qualified army warriors." Hearing that, the students could not help but straighten their backs and feel proud. After giving them a few words of encouragement, Han Shao turned to look at Mia and said with a smile, "I promise to find you a calamity grade teacher. From today onwards, Herluz will be your teacher, and he will do his best to teach you." Herluz had already known about this matter. He was the most loyal to the army and did not have any complaint. He smiled and nodded. "Although I'm usually very busy, I will still try to find time to teach you. Don't worry, I'm different from Reynold. I prefer a more relaxed education." Thank you, Your Excellency Black Star. Hello, teacher. Mia hurriedly thanked Han Xiao before greeting her Luz. Seeing this, the students behind could not help but reveal envious expressions. Who was her Luz? He was one of the upper echelons of the army and one of the elders who had followed Black Star since the beginning. To be able to become his student, one would definitely become the backbone of the army in the future. It was undoubtedly a bright future. However, these people were not the most envious. Nero clenched his teeth in jealousy. I want a normal teacher too. Why did I have to meet Reynold? Han Xiao retracted his gaze and stared at Nero. What's with that expression? Nothing. Nero felt bitter in his heart but did not wish to say it. He paused for a moment and suddenly thought of something. By the way, Godfather, I obtained an enemy weapon during a battle some time ago. I feel that it's a little strange and would like you to take a look at it. What's strange about it? I obtained it from a Kundi race officer during a boarding battle. I got my teammates to help me appraise it. Nero scratched his head and said, It seems to be a high-level enchanted weapon. Han Xiao was stunned. Enchanted weapon? This was very common in the galaxy, but the Kundi race did not have a super system and was a pure technological civilization. They did not know anything about magic. Then, where did the Kundi race officer get his weapon from? Let me take a look. Han Xiao was instantly interested. I left it in my room and did not bring it with me. I will bring it over to you later. Nero scratched his head. Just when Han Xiao was about to scold him, his communicator rang and interrupted him. Taking out his communicator, he saw that it was Aesop calling. Why is this darn old man contacting me? With a wave of his hand, he dismissed everyone, walked to the side, and picked up the call. Aesop, why are you looking for me? You should be the one who needs something. Aesop had an impatient look on his face. I predicted that you would contact me, so I took the initiative to look for you. Han Zhao's face cramped up. Striking first to gain the initiative is still fine. This ability of yours is really useful. That's right, I do need your help. I need you to use your ability to help me predict the whereabouts of a group of people. Shaking his head, Han Xiao roughly explained the situation with the Kundi race. Aesop was also very straightforward. Send me the information later. The more information you have, the more accurate the prophecy will be. Got it. Han Xiao nodded and paused for a moment before changing the topic. How are Ames and Hela? They are adventuring everywhere. What else can they do? Aesop rolled his eyes. It's not like you can't contact her. Why are you asking me? Alright, I'll hang up if there's nothing else. I'll inform you when the prophecy is out. Aesop then hung up the call. Han Xiao helplessly kept his communicator. Having an old man at home was like having a treasure. However, he did not intend to completely rely on Aesop. He walked out of the hall and headed to the dock before opening one of the hangars. There was a severely damaged spaceship in the hangar. This was the spaceship that the stowaways had left behind in the Kundi race's territory. It had been seized by the dynasty after the war. Han Xiao had specially requested for this spaceship from Terakov, and Terakov had sent someone to deliver it to him. They had used all their technology, magic, and metaphysics, but the dynasty was unable to find any clues on the spaceship. Thus, they did not mind letting Han Xiao inspect it as long as he could find some clues. Aesop's prophecy could only allow him to see what would happen in the future, but Han Xiao's special ability, a bold explorer, allowed him to see the past of an item. He felt that he would definitely be able to find something by using both abilities. He then placed his hand on the charred exterior of the spaceship. It was filled with holes, and the metal of the spaceship seemed to have been corroded by some kind of corrosive liquid. It was not smooth at all and felt cold to the touch. Let's see what kind of clues I can find this time. Han Xiao let out a breath and activated Bold Explorer. Who? His vision suddenly spun. Everything in front of him was like broken glass, scattering in all directions. All of a sudden, the fragments paused for a moment, and then they instantly swirled in reverse, piecing together and reassembling. The scene before his eyes turned into an industrial shipyard. A huge spaceship skeleton was floating in midair, and countless mechanical arms were assembling the parts around it. The clanking of the countless machines was like a symphony. Han Xiao observed his surroundings and quickly memorized the environment in his mind. The next moment, his vision shattered and reassembled again. This time, it turned into a cosmic space. An already formed spaceship was falling toward a planet, breaking through the atmosphere like a blazing meteor. He could vaguely tell that this was the spaceship when it was still intact. Right at this moment, the scene suddenly stopped. His original vision returned, and he was still standing in the hangar, touching the spaceship that had fallen. The bold explorer has ended. Your LUK has been reduced by 60% for 14 days. Han Xiao was used to ignoring the side effects of his abilities, so it did not matter to him whether his LUK was reduced or not. Thinking back to what he had just seen, his eyes flashed. This scene revealed the scene of the spaceship leaving the factory and crashing. Although the process was very short, there seems to be a pretty good clue. When he was in the shipyard, he quickly memorized his surroundings and noticed a detail. The workers working in the shipyard all had the same logo on their clothes. He entered the Dynasty's database and quickly found a match. This was the logo of a shipyard company located in the primeval Star River. I've locked onto the factory. Han Zhao's eyes flashed. Normally, shipyard companies would keep the serial numbers of all the spaceships that left the factory. Although he did not know if the serial number of this spaceship was correct or not, it was at least a clue. Looks like I'll have to send my mechanical army to the primeval Star River. At this moment, Han Xiao suddenly thought of something. Right, the primeval Star River is Manison's nest. Recently, I accepted Glory's invitation to do an activity. The location is Suzhou Rini Planet Dazzling Plaza Experience Store, Gusu District, 1588, Huchi Road. The time is August 4th, 1600. The registration method is to add Q Group 7551385511. Confirmation message. Sunday meetup. There are still some empty spots, so those who are interested in playing with me can come over. == smiley face. Chapter 987. P.S. There will be an event tomorrow. Suzhou Rini Planet Dazzling Plaza Experience Store, Gusu District, 1588, Huchi Road, 1600 hours p.m. Those who are interested can come and beat me up, ***. Godly Mechanic will be updated a little later today. It is currently in progress. Please wait for a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 988. After memorizing the name of this shipbuilding company, Han Xiao left the hangar and returned to his room. He remotely activated the mechanical army in the shattered Star Ring headquarters and boarded a spaceship. He then headed toward the primeval Star River through the Star Field Stargate. Ever since he obtained the Quantum Infinite Distance Transmission Channel and the Lord's Avatar, he had set up mechanical armies in many bases so that he could descend at any time. Manison was the strongest beyond Grade A faction in the primeval Star River, and the Black Star Corps did not have much influence there. Now that his relationship with the Mecha Empire had dropped to a freezing point, he had to be more careful in their territory. Boys should know how to protect themselves. As soon as he sent out his mechanical army, Nero came over with the strange, enchanted weapon that he had mentioned. Godfather, this is what I was talking about. Han Xiao took this unknown item from Nero's hands and examined it carefully. It was a spear that looked like a cold weapon. It was broken in the middle, and only the tip of the spear was left. It was greenish-black in color and had a bronze texture. Its surface was flowing with a misty golden brilliance, as if it was surging with magic power. The moment he held the broken spear, a notification popped up on the interface. Deity Assassin Damaged Type, Enchanted Melee Weapon Quality, Epic Orange, Equipment Requirements, above Level 230, 800 STR, 1000 DX, 600 MWS Attribute Bonus, plus 146 STR, plus 171 DX, plus 223 MYS Basic Attributes. Base Attack, 21,000 to 24,000 Durability, 755/9000 Energy, 744/15,000 Enchantment. Deity Assassin Incomplete. A plus 240% damage dealt by this weapon when the target is above level 200. Enchantment. Advanced Enchantment. Rapid Phantom Shadow plus 60% ATK Speed 1. 5% chance to release 2 phantom attacks every time you attack, dealing 75% of the attack damage. Enchantment. Divine Lock. Double Energy Lock. When you hit the opponent's physical body or mental body, there is a 20% chance of inflicting the energy lock status on the opponent. The opponent will not be able to refine or use energy. After this effect takes effect, it will have a cooldown of 30 seconds. Enchantment. A Psionic Wave. This rune can absorb various types of energy to replenish its energy and maintain various enchantments. When the energy is above 50%, your attacks will have a large range of splash damage. Enchantment. Molecular Penetration Basic Armor Penetration plus 1,600 Defense Penetration, Enchantment. Mana Rampage plus 33% Basic Critical Hit Rate, 20% of critical hit damage converted into true damage. Remaining 16 enchantments, Collapse/Expand. Remarks. This weapon is in a damaged state. Equipment requirements, basic attributes, and enchantment effects have all been greatly reduced. Han Xiaoxin was shocked. Even in its damaged state, the equipment requirement was already at level 230. If it was in its complete state, wouldn't it be a weapon that only beyond grade as could use? All the enchantments were high-level rune spells, especially the Stabbing God enchantment. Even the normal attack damage of an enemy over level 200 would be increased by 4 times. What did that mean? WDNMD. Master Break. The more enchantments there were, the higher the load. The fact that this weapon could withstand so many high-level enchantments meant that the material was extremely tough. It must have used very rare materials. Why would the Kundi race have such a thing? Tell me how you obtained this weapon. Han Xiao nodded. All right. Nero nodded and began to explain. It was a very conventional boarding battle. My teammates and I killed our way into the cabin and exchanged fire with the enemy's main force. I charged straight at the enemy's officer and shattered his armor. I remembered your teachings and didn't forget to finish him off. However, the ground suddenly exploded and we all fell down. Below us was a pitch-black warehouse, and I saw that this weapon was placed in a transparent vacuum box. That officer quickly opened the box and charged at me with this weapon. I originally wanted to dodge, but halfway through, he suddenly exploded. That was how I obtained this weapon. Blown up? That guy's level was too low and did not meet the requirements of the Stabbing God. Thus, he could not withstand the magical energy contained in the weapon and exploded. Han Xiao guessed. The stronger the weapon, the stronger the individual controlling it. If one did not meet the requirements of the weapon, they would not be able to fully utilize the effects of the weapon. However, there were a small number of weapons that had a risk of exploding if they could not withstand the magical energy. The products of master spellcasters only cared about killing and not burying. I have never even heard of any after-sales service. How could they have such a conscience like me? Han Xiao shook his head. The Stabbing God is most likely used by a beyond grade A super. Since it's a weapon with a name, Perhaps there are records of it on the internet? Han Xiao logged into the dynasty's database and searched for the name, a stabbing god. A bunch of information immediately popped up. Opening the file at the top, Han Xiao's heart skipped a beat. According to the information, the deity assassinator was a weapon created by the beyond grade A dwarf mage, divine blacksmith Thorn. He was a magic weapon forge master who died in year 79 of the galaxy calendar. In his lifetime, he had created countless pieces of magic equipment and contributed greatly to the development of magic forging in the entire universe. He was a figure that all mage students would definitely see in their forging and enchantment textbook. According to the file, the stabbing god was a beyond grade A weapon that Thorn had made for his friend. Furthermore, it was only a part of the stabbing god set. The God Slayer set was a legendary work left behind by Thorn. It was ranked third in the list of Master Thorn, top 100 legendary works. The individual pieces of equipment were only orange epic grade, but the entire set was a gold universal treasure. In history, the Stabbing God set only had one owner, and that was Thorn's friend, a beyond grade A pugilist with the nickname Holy Spear. Holy Spear disappeared in Galaxy Calendar Year 103, and the set disappeared with him. No one knew the reason for his disappearance, and this was an unsolved case. At this moment Philip appeared. Lord Hum, I've detected a weak multi-dimensional energy remnant in this weapon. Should I conduct a detailed inspection? Han Xiao nodded, took out all kinds of detectors, and scanned the deity assassinator. The results were out very quickly, showing the multi-dimensional energy composition and imprints on the weapon. Among them, the ratio of negative energy was the highest, and the traces of fracture were the most obvious. Clearly, this weapon had been broken by someone using negative energy, and this type of energy was commonly seen in secondary dimensions. So, this guy called Holy Spear most likely died in a secondary dimension. Han Xiaoxin thought to himself. This was very reasonable. Exploring the secondary dimension was full of unknown dangers. For pugilists who did not know how to create clones, teleport, or create robots, they could only use their physical bodies to take risks in the secondary dimension. If they were not careful, they would be in deep trouble. How could they be as carefree as mages and mechanics? According to historical statistics, there were two most common ways for a beyond grade A to die. One was to be killed by another beyond grade A, and the other was to die in a secondary dimension and become a missing person. Connecting the dots, Han Xiao had a rough guess. These weapons were drifting in the secondary dimensions and would occasionally encounter wormholes or spacetime rift. They would fall into the main universe and coincidentally land in the dust-light star cluster, which was why they were discovered by the Kundi race. He did not know when this had happened, but it seemed like the Kundi race was unable to discover the secrets of magic from this weapon and did not place much importance on it. Thinking about this, Han Xiao looked at Nero helplessly. You even managed to pick it up? It seems like I went too easy on you. My conscience is indeed superfluous when it comes to you. Godfather, what did you discover? Seeing that Han Xiao was looking at him without saying anything, Nero asked. Cough. Han Xiao coughed and said with a solemn expression, according to my analysis, this is an extremely dangerous enchanted weapon. Your strength is not enough to bear the burden, and forcefully using it will be dangerous. Thus, I left it with me for safekeeping. It can't be, right? Nero's face fell, and he said with suspicion, Why didn't I feel any burden when I held it? Are you trying to trick me? Holding it is one thing, using it is another. Why would I joke with you? Who do you think I am? Why would I lie to you? Han Xiao said righteously. Nero still wanted to say something, but Han Xiao covered his mouth and pushed him out of the room. Bang! Before Nero could react, the door was closed behind him. Han Xiao's voice could be heard from the other side of the door. If you have nothing to do, you can walk around. If you find anything good, remember to bring it over for me to appraise. Dream on. I'm not coming anymore, Nero said with an indignant expression and ran off like a child whose red packet had been confiscated by his parents. In the room, Han Xiao took out a safe and locked the deity assassinator within. He would only be interested if he could obtain the entire deity slaying set. However, there was only one component, and it was not of much use to him. The probability of him obtaining the entire set was too low, and he did not dare to hope for it. However, the deity assassinator was a treasure for those who relied on close combat. The level 230 restriction was equivalent to a peak grade A+ calamity grade super. He did have such experts under him, and Hardaway was one of them. However, Hardaway was only an Esper, and while he was tanky, there were no bonuses when using a weapon. He was only suited for taking a beating and was not suited for attacking. He was a pure meat shield, unlike Han Xiao, who was tanky and dashing. In Han Xiao's eyes, Lothair was more suited to use the deity assassinator than Hardaway. This was a weapon that Thorn had specially made for pugilists, and only pugilists would be able to unleash its full potential. While Lothair had not reached the peak of his strength, if he obtained this weapon, his assassination ability would immediately increase by 1 or 2 levels. Furthermore, the mission to deal with the mastermind would probably require a master assassin like Lothair. The matter with the Kundi race had come to an end. After settling all the refugees in the Black Star territory, the Red Empire did not stop and immediately resumed their exploration. The war had been delayed for a few months, but they did not fall behind in terms of progress. The dynasty had gained a lot. Taking over the Kundi race's territory was equivalent to obtaining the stargates in the middle of the Dust Light star cluster, saving the time needed to slowly build the stargate. Furthermore, the information of the planets in the Kundi race's database had reduced the area that they needed to explore. The dynasty had increased the exploration progress by a large margin. Without any obstacles, the second phase of the exploration was back on track. In the explored universe, the dynasty did not publicly announce this battle. However, they secretly sent out a large number of intelligence personnel to search for the mastermind. Aesop gave a prophecy and pointed out a certain region that the stowaways would pass by. However, this region was further away in an unexplored star cluster, and there were no stargates. The dynasty could only send spaceships over, but they did not know if they would be able to make it in time. Thankfully, Han Xiao had made preparations. After waiting for a period of time, the long-range mechanical army finally arrived in the primeval Star River and headed toward the factory that bold explorer had revealed. Chapter 989. Godly Mechanic participated in an event today and stayed up late to write it. Please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 990. On Planet 3 Kings, 2 people were walking side by side in the quiet corridor of the government palace. One of them was a high-level intelligence officer, and the other was a high-ranking official of the Modo civilization. His position was Maddie's leader. The two of them chatted casually as they walked. "You're in charge of the project of making use of the natives and report directly to the 3 Kings. This is a rare opportunity." The high-ranking official walked with his hands behind his back. "Maddie, I've always believed in your abilities. However, can you guarantee that the dynasty won't find out the truth? If anything happens, the 3 Kings will remember you, and your future will end here." I've said it many times. The dynasty won't be able to find out that we did it." Maddie shook his head and sneered. "I've already dealt with all traces a few years ago. The serial number of the spaceship has been completely erased, and I've also used magic many times to interfere with the prophecy ability. The Dynasty won't be able to find any information on this spaceship, so what other clues can they have? Even if the Dynasty really found out where the spaceship came from, I've already gotten the intelligence officers to erase all the production and transaction records of the spaceship. The Dynasty won't be able to find anything. Furthermore, that intelligence officer has disguised himself, and there's nothing suspicious about his resume. Outsiders will only think that he's dead. His confidential files have been temporarily deleted from the database, and I've also transferred him away. No one will be able to find him. Furthermore, we weren't the ones who bought this spaceship, but a private financial group. It's been sold many times, and it was even stolen by galactic pirates. There were no survivors, and it became a missing spaceship. We only secretly seized it more than 10 years ago, and there are no records of it left behind. Thus, if the Dynasty wants to find out about this transaction, they won't be able to find us. A few years is more than enough, and I've also made some arrangements. If the Dynasty continues to investigate, they will only be led to suspect that it's another supercluster civilization. No matter what, the Dynasty won't be able to find any evidence that we did it. Maddie's tone was filled with confidence. After all, sending the spaceship to the Kundi race was something that happened a few years ago. He had already started to erase all traces a few years ago, and he was very confident that the Dynasty would not be able to find any clues. The high-ranking official nodded slowly. I'm relieved to hear that. The silver-blue planet slowly rotated in the universe before his eyes like a gem rolling on black velvet. The starlight reflected on the smooth silver armor of the Lord's avatar, and the pitch-black mechanical soldiers silently followed behind, as if they had merged into one with the darkness. This was a comprehensive industrial planet in the primeval Star River, and a large number of financial groups had set up factories here. Bold Explorer revealed that it was a division of labor under a shipbuilding company. It was located on this planet, and it was the origin of the fallen spaceship. This shipyard belonged to the most ordinary type of shipyard. It only mass-produced low-grade spaceships of various basic models. It did not carry out any research and development, and all it earned was production fees. Shipyards like this still had a certain market in the universe, and they mainly accepted orders from the public. After all, basic spaceships were cheap and in high demand, and other advanced shipyards would not invest large amounts of resources to produce such basic spaceships that had no core competitiveness. Before Han Shao sent out the mechanical army, he had already checked the background of this shipyard in the database. It was just a small private enterprise with no background. The mastermind chose this shipyard. If I'm not wrong, they've already erased all traces. Han Shao pondered. Although he had an idea in his heart, he still had to check it out to verify the result. Entering the quantum network, his vision turned into a virtual networked world again. The outline of the planet in front of him blurred, and only countless glowing quantum network nodes were left, forming a mottled sea of light. After locking onto the quantum network node of the shipyard, Han Shao directly entered. The data firewall of a small private enterprise was like air, and it did not have any effect on him. He went all the way to the deepest part of the network and released a huge amount of data. In just an instant, Han Shao had destroyed the database of this shipyard, and all the information was leaked to Han Shao. He opened the production log and transaction records and found that the earliest record was only 3 years ago, and the history of this shipyard was far longer than that. As expected, the mastermind did something, Han Shao thought to himself. He checked the other records and found that this shipyard had an accident 3 years ago. During the production of the spaceship, there was a problem with the energy source, which caused the entire shipyard to explode. The mainframe was destroyed and all the data was lost. The paper records were also gone, and it almost affected the surrounding enterprises. After the investigation, it was found that there was a very small chance of a natural failure. Han Shao did not believe that it was a man-made disaster to destroy evidence. If he was the mastermind, not only would he have to erase the records of where the spaceship was produced, but he would also have to turn the spaceship into a ghost ship that had no records for a long time. There are no records, and I still don't know the serial number of the spaceship. This lead is more than half broken. Han Zhao's Lord's avatar's eyes flashed. However, it's not like I didn't find anything. At the very least, this lead revealed that the spaceship was produced in the primeval Star River. Then, the biggest suspects in the primeval Star River would be the 4 supercluster civilizations. The range of possibilities had been narrowed down from the entire universe to just a star field. Of course, there was also the possibility that the civilizations in the other star fields had purposely bought spaceships from other civilizations with the intention of framing them. However, he had to consider the possibility of this happening first. Although he did not have any leads at the moment in his previous life, the dynasty had also encountered an incident similar to the Kundi race. The natives had been strengthened and sent to their death. After the incident with the Kundi race, the dynasty was more prepared and discovered some of the suspects. Among the suspects in the primeval Star River, the Modo civilization, one of the 4 supercluster civilizations, was named the most. They often caused trouble, so how could they not get their shoes wet? The dynasty was not to be trifled with either. The mastermind could erase the clues of the past, but he had no way of changing the clues of the future in Han Zhao's memories. It was as if he had not committed a crime yet, but he would commit a crime in the future. He did not know if the Kundi race incident was caused by the Modo civilization, but since they had a criminal record, they were the biggest suspects. Because the clues were broken, Han Zhao had 2 thoughts. If the accident at the shipyard was caused by someone, he could try to find the records and surveillance of this planet from 3 years ago and see if he could find out who caused the accident. It was easy for the mastermind to tamper with the data of a small private enterprise, but it was much more difficult to tamper with the surveillance of the entire planet. If the mastermind had tampered with the surveillance, Han Zhao would just treat it as a dead end. The second method was the dumbest method, which was to use the elimination method. There were only a few civilizations in the primeval Star River that could cause trouble, and he would investigate them one by one. If he did that, the first civilization that Han Zhao would investigate would be the Modo civilization, which was the biggest suspect. He had always liked to do 2 things at the same time. He immediately filtered the records from 3 years ago and matched them with the surveillance of the satellite on the day of the accident. With his powerful computing ability, he quickly obtained a result. There were no suspicious individuals near the shipyard on that day. It's not an outsider? There are 2 possibilities. First, the mastermind tampered with the surveillance of the entire planet to hide the traces of an outsider. Second, it's an employee. Han Zhao could not do anything about the former, so he could only think of an employee. If it was not an outsider, then it could only be an insider. If I'm the culprit and received orders from my superior to do this, then there's no need for me to stay in the shipyard after creating a disaster and completing my mission. Therefore, I need an excuse to leave. In that case, Han Zhao opened the obituary of the employees that the shipyard had announced 3 years ago. It listed all the employees that had died in the accident. After the accident 3 years ago, all the surviving shipwrights had been strictly interrogated, and many of them had left their jobs. However, according to Han Zhao's understanding of intelligence agents, the possibility of them faking their deaths to disappear from the face of the earth was higher. This was because it was more clean. Excellent intelligence agents would definitely prepare multiple identities for themselves. Death was equivalent to destroying their identities, washing away their ties and greatly reducing their worries. Therefore, it was very likely that the culprit was on the death list. The biographies of the galactic residents could be checked through other channels. It was not difficult for Han Zhao to check the biographies of these people. Their professional experience and immigration records were all very clear. What he needed to confirm now was whether anyone's biographies were fake. It was easy to tamper with information, but it was not difficult to verify it. It was just more tedious, and that was to visit the companies and relatives shown in the biographies and ask if there was such a person. If someone was found to have faked their biographies, then they could be listed as a suspect. The next step was to use the elimination method that he had just thought of. He would compare the biographies of the suspects with the biographies of the Modo civilization and the other supercluster civilizations to determine if they were the culprit and what organization they belonged to. If the culprit was hiding in the shipyard, they would have definitely used a fake identity and disguised their appearance. However, this was not impossible. The data of the shipyard was gone, but the satellite surveillance of the planet was still there. With Han Zhao's virtual technology, he could set up a model parameter and import these videos and the biographies of those organizations into it. He could then conduct a large-scale comprehensive analysis to determine the similarity and see through the disguise. This way, he could complete the comparison with the biographies of the civilizations. Then, the question was, how could he obtain the biographies of these supercluster civilizations? The Black Star Core did not have much influence in the primeval Star River. Han Xiao patted his metal head. He did not know about the others, but someone like Manison, who had a strong desire for control, definitely had a large amount of the biographies of these supercluster civilizations. Even the Radiant Federation had to guard against the virtual intrusion of the Mecha Empire, so Han Xiao most likely had a record. How could these supercluster civilizations be spared? With the number one virtual technology in the universe, it would be a waste not to be the next-door neighbor. Alright, looks like I really have to look for the Mecha Empire. Chapter 991. When outsiders mentioned Manison's organization, they would usually refer to it as the Mecha Empire, mechanical race, or directly use Manison's name to refer to his organization. His personal name itself represented his organization, and there was no XX organization. Manison's territory was located somewhere in the primeval Star River. Although it was under the jurisdiction of a star system civilization in name, it was actually under Manison's control. Han Zhao's Lord's avatar brought his mechanical army to visit Manison. Before coming, he had already sent a private message, and Manison agreed to meet. The location was set on a planet where the mechanical race lived. He had many planets under his control, and this was only one of them. The Lord's avatar arrived at its destination. In its sight was a mechanical planet. A huge psionic shield enveloped the planet, and there were a large number of mechanical soldiers patrolling the planet around the clock. At a glance, there were about 300 to 400 million of them, and this was only the outer layer patrol team of the planet. That old thing is indeed an old thing. What a rich family. Han Xiao clicked his tongue and shook his head. Manison's territory was vast, and he had deployed machinery factories and armies in many star fields. He also had the mechanical civilization that had already developed as an important support. The exact number of troops was a mystery, and the various organizations only knew that it was an astronomical number. Han Zhao's troops did not have to wait for long before an opening appeared on the planet's shield. A squad of Manison's mechanical soldiers led the way. Following the guide, the Lord's avatar slowly descended, and the situation on the surface became clearer. This was one of the planets where the mechanical race lived. Cities could be seen on the ground, and there were people walking on the streets like ants. These were all members of the mechanical race. Manison was the second beyond Grade A in the history of the mechanical race. Although he had transformed into a new species, he still treated the mechanical race as a phased race and was the leader of the race. However, unlike people like Cisco who valued their race, the mechanical race was just an important resource to him. He did not have much responsibility or feelings for them. As a race with a beyond grade A inheritance, the mechanical race had superior mechanical talents and provided Manison with a large number of talent. Many of the mechanics under him came from the mechanical race. Furthermore, more than 80% of the mechanical race was a firm believer of the machinery faith. After flying for a while, a huge mechanical floating island appeared in their sight. This was one of Manison's palaces. The Lord's avatar led the mechanical army and landed on the landing platform of the floating island. Dang 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 dang. The soles of his feet stepped on the ground, producing a heavy metallic sound. As soon as he landed, he heard someone talking not far away. Hee hee, Black Star, I didn't expect you to take the initiative to visit me. With a series of footsteps, Manison's sovereign's avatar walked over. This time, it wasn't his main body that had come to meet him. Seeing this, Han Xiaoxin sneered. Heh, brittle skin, what a coward. After complaining to himself, Han Xiao calmed himself down and said, Don't worry. You invited me to your place a few years ago, but I kept delaying it. It just so happened that I was on the way, so I came over to take a look. His tone was calm, and he did not mention the unhappiness between the two of them. The electronic voice of the Lord's avatar was also emotionless. Manison smiled and did not mention the previous grudge. He had defeated more than one divine throne mechanic. In the eyes of a big shot like him, this conflict had not reached the point where they would fight each other to the death. That was that. As someone at this level, even if there was a competitive relationship, they could still sit down and talk about things calmly. In that case, come with me. I'll take you on a tour of my base. Manison turned around and led the way. Due to the previous virtual battle, the relationship between the two of them had dropped to the freezing point. However, Black Star was a peak beyond grade A after all. Since he had specially come to visit him, Manison would not be rude, nor would he refuse. The two of them walked around the base and saw very common facilities. There was nothing special. Manison was not interested in showing his various trump cards to a potential competitor, just like how Han Xiao did not show him the spacetime amber back then. Han Xiao had already expected this. He knew that Manison was not the kind of person who liked to show off his trump cards, so he did not have any other fantasies. The main reason for this trip was to happily do business. After walking around for a while, he entered the conference room with Manison, sat down, and talked about the main topic. Since we're all using our avatars, there's no need for drink. Manison leaned back in his chair and said calmly, Why are you looking for me today? I want to borrow some information, Han Xiao said slowly. What is it? I want to borrow the confidential personnel files of the primeval star rivers 4 supercluster civilizations and other star cluster civilizations. Manison was a little surprised. He sat up a little straighter. What do you want this for? To find someone. Han Zhao's words were concise. He had already gathered the information in his plan. On the list of casualties, there was indeed someone who had forged his resume. Now, he only needed to compare the confidential personnel files. For this, the best choice was to look for the Mecha Empire. The primeval Star River was not a lame civilization like the Kundi race, but a proper supercluster civilization. Their technological strength was only second to the 3 universal civilizations. Not only would it take a lot of time and effort to infiltrate, but the success rate was also very low. Even if he managed to infiltrate, he would be discovered at any time, and he would not be able to obtain complete information. Furthermore, the files that he needed to compare were not limited to just one. In order to complete the selection, he would have to infiltrate all 4 supercluster civilizations. Even if he managed to find the culprit, he would offend the other 3 civilizations. If he could not find the culprit, it would be even worse. He would be making enemies for no reason, and Han Xiao did not want to do such a loss-making business. On the other hand, Han Xiao felt that the mastermind had definitely done something and might have deleted the files of the culprit. If that was the case, it would be useless even if he managed to infiltrate. The Mecha Empire was different. As the big boss of the Radiant Federation, his role in the primeval Star River was equivalent to that of a leader. He had always been collecting intelligence for the Radiant. With 4 such good neighbors, Old Mike would occasionally sneak into other people's homes to steal and back up a large number of confidential documents. Thus, in the Mecha Empire, he would be able to obtain the complete files of the 4 supercluster civilizations. Manison pondered for a few seconds before shaking his head. It's impossible for me to lend it to you. I only accept transactions. That's fine. What do you want? The space-time amber. Manison brought it up again. Impossible. Han Xiao rejected immediately. You old fogey, you must be dreaming. You want to exchange a piece of intelligence for a universal treasure? You're really a business genius. Only the Heaven and Earth Bank can accommodate a genius like you. Not even one? Hee. Hearing this, Manison spread his hands and did not say anything else. His meaning was clear. Since you don't want to accept my offer, what are your conditions? Han Xiao pondered for a moment before saying, I can publicly announce that I support you to be the strongest mechanic in the universe. I am. Why would I need your support? Manison asked. Isn't it good to strengthen your position? I don't need it. Manison waved his hands. I'm the great Mecha Empire. Why would I need an army? What a joke. Han Xiao stroked his chin and said, or we can make an agreement. I will not challenge your position for the next 50 years. Manison heard this and said with interest, You're saying that you only need 50 years to surpass me? Anything is possible. Han Xiao did not deny it. Manison smiled and said, No need. I don't need such a method to guarantee my position. Han Xiao leaned forward and said, How about I owe you a favor? Only a favor that has to be returned is valuable. Judging from our relationship, your favor is meaningless to me. Manison shook his head, indicating that he was no longer in his business. After a pause, he did not wait for Han Xiao's reply and slowly said, Forget it. Forget it, I can give you the information you want, but you won't be able to give me what I want. Let the Crimson Dynasty talk to me. Han Xiao pretended to ponder and said, If that's the case, why don't I try to convince the Empire to provide you with a batch of evolutionary totems? Manison was not interested. You should give me the evolution cube. Are you awake or asleep right now? Han Xiao's tone was puzzled. Manison was thick-skinned and did not mind. But the totems are useless to me. Are you sure? Han Xiao knocked on the table. You don't need the totems, but you're still leading the mechanical race. The totems should be useful to them, right? Hearing this, Manison started to plan. Seeing this, Han Xiao shrugged and said, I can't give you any more. You have to know that the other organizations have more or less obtained some of the secrets of these civilizations through various channels. Yours is just more complete, but it's not the only one. If you don't agree to this condition, this deal can only be cancelled. All right, I agree. Manison nodded lightly. He could get as much information as he wanted, and it was a piece of cake for him. Manison felt that it was still acceptable for him to obtain additional evolutionary totems. Although he did not value this deal, the totems were indeed somewhat useful to the mechanical race. Then it's settled. I'll try to get it from the Empire, Han Xiao said. This was against the rules, but as long as the number of totems sold was controlled, the Empire would not be bothered by such details. Due to the suppression of radiance and ethereal, there were many totems being circulated. Although the Empire did not sell them publicly, if he could obtain the required intelligence, the Empire would not be too rigid. With Han Zhao's position, these were all negotiable. He had originally intended to use the evolutionary totems to exchange for this intelligence. As for the verbal agreement, if Manison dared to agree, he would dare to say it. Han Xiao was not someone who cared about his face like Heber. According to his plan, he still had a lot of room for improvement, and he did not intend to continue fighting with the Mecha Empire. Thus, he did not care about this verbal agreement. If Manison agreed, he could even save the evolutionary totems. Manison only knows that I have great potential, but he does not know how fast I can accumulate strength. His impression of me is still the same as the last time we fought, and he does not know that I have already obtained perfect mechanical sense. As long as I do not fight with him, it will be difficult for him to discover. Han Xiao thought. The reason I'm exchanging for this information is for the mission reward of the Kundi race. Manison might think that this is just a job for the Empire, but he does not know how much I can earn from it. After the two of them reached an agreement, Han Xiao sent out an application to the Empire. The upper echelons knew that he was investigating the identity of the mastermind, and after some discussion, they decided to approve Han Xiao's application. After some discussion, they decided on the number of totems that would be provided. There would only be 100 of them, and it was not a big deal. Manison didn't want to dwell on the details of the deal, so he directly threw the information over. With the information in hand, Han Xiao stood up and said, "The totems will be sent over soon. I'll take my leave first." Okay. Manison did not have any objections and watched as Han Xiao left before secretly leaving the quantum network. Although he had defeated Black Star in the previous virtual battle, that did not mean that Manison did not have the slightest bit of fear. He was worried that Han Xiao would come prepared and imitate his virtual intrusion. Thus, he had already made preparations and reinforced the quantum network node layer after layer, preparing a trap. For a virtual mechanic of their level, they could only attack head-on if they wanted to invade the other party. There was no way for them to go around the firewall without being discovered. If Black Star did not admit defeat and wanted to invade, things would not end well for them. He did not expect that Han Xiao would come and go in such a hurry without any intention of causing trouble. All these preparations were for nothing. Looks like he really has no intention of continuing to compete with me. It should be the dynasty that has brainwashed him. Based on Han Xiao's performance earlier, Manison had a guess. The spaceship was far away from the mechanical race's territory. Han Xiao immediately took action. He took out the parameter model that he had prepared long ago, inserted the data that he had prepared, and started matching. With the support of his efficient computing power, the matching was completed very quickly. He locked onto a target. Modo civilization? It really is them. Han Xiao glanced at it and raised his eyebrows. The screen showed that the person who forged the resume was an intelligence officer of the Modo civilization. If it's the Modo civilization, Han Xiao searched his memory for a while and thought of some famous people of the Modo civilization. He took out his communicator and contacted a number. After 2 rings, the call was connected. Only soft breathing could be heard, and the other party did not speak first. Lode Hair. Yes. Come to the primeval Star River. I have a mission, and I also have a gift for you. Okay. After exchanging a few words, Lode Hair hung up. He was a man of few words. He did not need to give any instructions to a reliable adult male and would be able to call him over with just a word. He could now confirm that the Modo civilization was the instigator of the Kundi race incident. However, Han Xiao did not know who the instigator was. However, it did not matter. The mission requirement was to take revenge on the mastermind as much as possible. In that case, he might as well cut the Gordian knot. The current and future famous people of the Modo civilization from all walks of life, one after another, they were all slaughtered by you. P.S. I haven't been on Weibo for a long time. I only opened it at the end of last month. Search for Chidian Chi Peijia. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.